I think it will play out something like this. I think that the rate of change is going to cause a lot of people a lot of turmoil. They will get addicted to things like social media and the dopamine cycle. Their sense of well-being will be tremendously disrupted by losing a sense of purpose to AI. And the reason that even in the face of all of that, I consider myself wildly optimistic about the future. I am very aggressively a techno optimist, is because I don't think that evolution, and that probably is the right word, though I don't just mean it from the sort of standard perspective of your DNA mutations accumulate and you get better. I mean, technological evolution, societal evolution. I don't think it cares about any one generation, and it will gladly create a period of 15 to 20 years of just absolute brutality. But on the other side of that will be a generation that grows up with just, oh, this is all de rigueur. And yeah, I have a quantum computer in my pocket and there's fusion energy and it's abundant and anything I can imagine becomes real. And the person that I want to speak to is the person that wants to map out where this goes and how to ride this wave well. And to your point, and I don't know if this is what you meant by power, but to me, power is the ability to close your eyes, imagine a world better than this one, open your eyes, acquire the skills to actually make that world come true. And when I think about as a filmmaker, all my entire journey to getting into business and growing Quest and, spending 20-ish years of my life doing something sort of to the side of what I really wanted to do was because I had no idea how to break into the industry, because making a film was a no-budget film was $100,000.
Yeah.
And now it will be, if I were to have kids today, my kids would grow up in a world where you just type onto your phone the kind of movie. In fact, they're not even going to type. They would go and the thing that they are most likely to want to see in that moment would exist.
Yes.
And as long as we're able to understand our baser natures and not be a slave to algorithms, but instead go, okay, I understand how I have to create distance from this. I can't allow myself to get addicted. I want to use these things in order to experience whatever thing you want to experience. Then I think that will be okay. And I think, so I'll make a prediction. I think you agree with this. I think I've heard you talk about this, but if not, let me know. The reason that the Fermi paradox isn't a paradox is I don't think people end up exploring space. I think they explore virtual worlds, which will be far more interesting than anything that's a slave to physics.
Yeah.
And that's the reality that I think that we're moving towards. And between here and there, many people will be broken emotionally and they simply won't be your competition. And so for those that are paying attention and figuring out how to leverage this technology, you will create the next wave of opportunity and you will thrive.
I agree with all of that. And I do agree that there's going to be a period of turbulence over the next 5 to 15 years. And that turbulence is going to come because we're in the midst of a phase change in society. You've had Mo Gadot on the show, right? Twice, yeah. And Mo's become a dear friend. We're working on a documentary together around Scary Smart, his book, which I commend to everybody. And I've had this conversation with Elon that on the flip side of AGI, we do have abundance, defined as access to all the food, water, energy, healthcare, education that you want. Everybody has access to. It's completely democratized and demonetized. And I think that's a more peaceful world as well. If you can have what you want, it's also somewhat of a post-capitalist world, but we can talk about that separately. Then you're less likely to, blow yourself up in a suicide vest. If everybody could be expansive and they're almost in their own light cone, so to speak, instead of having to oppress other people, you just go and you build and you create.
How do we cross the chasm though? Because there's a big chasm.
So that's the issue, is the chasm over the next 5 to 10 years. When AI comes in the near term, and I think we're going to see this. I think, Mo and I have talked about patient zero being the 2024 presidential elections, right?
Why?
Because I think it is, in 2020, Cambridge Analytica moved the needle and caused a disruption with, massive budget. In 2024, a kid in their garage using generative AI can do that.
By creating deep fakes?
Deep fakes, creating, social persuasive arguments that get traction and sway people's thinking, whether they're true or not. I mean, say something enough times to somebody in enough ways, and they believe it, and stop asking, well, is this true and where did it come from? It's just, we have all of these cognitive biases, which are fascinating. It's a whole field I'm fascinated by, that our brain takes all these shortcuts because we can't process all the information. So I've got a recency cognitive bias. I give more value to something I recently heard, right? I've got a familiarity bias. If someone dresses and looks like me, I give it more credence. I have a negativity bias. I give much more credence to negative information than positive information. And this sort of stuff saved your life on the savannas of Africa 100,000 years ago. Today, you can be manipulated by them. I think I forgot where I was going.
Well, let me
with
ask,
this.
what is the thing about the 2024 election that you're most afraid of?
Besides who might become president?
Well, if that's the thing you're most afraid of.
I think it's going to become, I think we have a divisiveness coming, and people are playing full out, and it's no longer gentlemanly politics. And I think, part of this is a post-truth economy where you can't tell whether something is truthful or not. And one of the things I'm afraid about is more civil war than anything else.
Yeah.
Right. So this next, I'm the person who, the glass is not half full, it's overflowing. But yet I do see this period of turbulence. We have a whole population, we have a whole generation having gone through COVID who are now going to step into a world where they're not getting the jobs they expected because AI is coming in and taking a number of those jobs. So there's going to be youthful social unrest. Sounds like Arab Spring almost over again. So how do we navigate that? And I've been thinking about that. My wife, Kristen Mogadat, and I have been, talking about, what do you teach people? How do you navigate this? And part of it is, how do people survive traumatic experiences? Because it's going to be traumatic for a lot of people. But yet, on the flip side of this, we're going to see, I think, tremendous abundance. So it is something we have to navigate. But humanity navigates these things over and over again. We navigated World War I, World War II.
Do you have any rules or insights? I'm not sure what the right moniker to put it on it is, that you want people to understand about themselves or whatever to help us navigate this well?
I want to have those. I'm not sure I have them formed yet. I think that the most important thing is having hope about the future. If you ask yourself the question, in the year 2023, would you rather live here now than the year 1900? Do you have an answer?
For me?
Yes, for you.
Yeah, obviously today.
Right? And I think the vast majority, when I ask people is, and people who say the good old days, 1900, they're fooling themselves.
For sure.
The
first time they got an infection, they'd be like, whoa.
Yes, I'm dead. The streets of any major city stank from urine and manure from horses.
Yup.
Life was short and brutish. The average age was 40. You were dead from tuberculosis by then. I mean, it was really brutal. And you would work 70, 80-hour work weeks, and your kids were working to try and make ends meet. Child labor was prominent back then. So we romanticize the past. And between the year 1900 and today, I did the work. I have a book. I'm got a book coming out in the first half of next year called Age of Abundance, which is my follow-on to my first book. And I looked at what were the number of needless deaths over this last century. And if you look at disease, warfare, and starvation, it was about 240 million people died from those.
Whoa.
Right? So you had 50 million people dying from just the Spanish flu in World War I. And you look at we lived a pretty brutal life over the last 123 years.
20th century was rough.
And yet we got here. And so I think ultimately it's about the human spirit overcoming these things. Mm. And so I am hopeful that the human spirit will allow us to evolve to this next level. And we are evolving as humanity. We're evolving technologically and societally. And we are also going to evolve in other ways. We're going to go from evolution by Darwinism, natural selection, to evolution by human direction. And it's moving fast, right? This is what Ray Kurzweil talks about in The Singularity. That, in his, there's lots of singularities. Singularity comes from physics as a event horizon you can't see beyond, right? And so we're really close to the AI singularity, which is, I can't tell you what's going to happen in 5 years, let alone 10 years with AI. It's moving so incredibly fast. And then Ray talks about the singularity as the convergence of all of these bio-info nano, information technologies from AI, biotechnologies, nanotechnologies, which is transforming life at such a rapid.
How real is nanotechnology?
I think it is definitively real.
Right now, today.
There are people working on elements of it. A good friend of mine has dropped off the planet to go invest his wealth in building it.
What does it do today?
Today, we are building molecular machines versus atomic machines. So what is nanotechnology in the first place? Nanotechnology is the ability to assemble things atom by atom. So Eric Drexler wrote a book in 1986 called Engines of Creation, in which he looked at nanotechnology and the ability to, the physics and the energetics of being able to build things atom by atom. And he writes about an idea called an assembler, which is a machine that's able to grab a silicon atom or an oxygen atom or a nitrogen atom and bond it and assemble things. And a assembler, I could have an assembler in my hand and I can command it to take atoms from my skin and manufacture an assembler and give it to you. And now you have one. And you can have that assembler replicate itself, right? And these are atomic machines. And now I can drop it in the soil and I can say, produce me an electric Lamborghini. And it can go to the open source and find a design for an electric Lamborghini. And then it will take the atoms out of the soil. It'll need energy. Energy is abundant in the universe. And it'll say, I need a kilogram of titanium or a kilogram of lithium or whatever the case might be. And you'll provide that raw feedstock, and it'll manufacture this for you. Now, we know this, like an oak tree seed is a, if you would, nanotechnology. You take a seed for an oak tree, you plant it. It just does it very slowly. Mm. It takes the atom. It has the information set inside of that oak seed, and it grabs atoms from the soil, and then energy from the sun, and over time it builds a mighty oak. It just does it at a very slow time frame. And so the question is, can you build atomic machines that can manufacture things at a much faster time frame? And so there is nothing that has been ever shown that says it's impossible from the laws of physics. And we're building things now at a molecular level, and in some cases an atomic level. And I believe, Ray Kurzweil's prediction is that it is, in the next 15 years that we'll see these coming into existence, and AI will become probably our most valued tool for being able to produce those atomic assemblers. And then it's between AI and nanotechnology, the universe is reinvented instantly. We're in a post-capitalist society at that point. What has value anymore? Very few things.
Yeah. So what is a post-capitalist society then? What does
my
that
God.
look like?
You really want to go there? Jeremy Rifkin wrote a book called Zero Marginal Society, which talks about this. And it's a world of massive abundance where you can have almost anything you want. There is wealth accumulation for the people who get started earlier in that. But I would rather just focus on the notion that in this world, you can have access to all the food, water, energy, healthcare, education, everything you want. It's available. I don't know, listen, I can tell you the world's going to get very strange very fast.
Yeah. My concern, going back to the nearest term strangeness, would be the 2024 election.
Richard Feynman, that's his name. Okay. Richard Feynman, professor, yes, wrote about this. He wrote in I think 1958, he wrote a very famous paper, or gave a lecture called "There's Plenty of Room at the Bottom." And he said, let's look not at macro structures and the universe, but let's look at atomic structure. And Richard Feynman wrote effectively the first paper on nanotechnology. And then Eric Drexler wrote the first book on the subject and really explored the physics of it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot about Feynman, but
Brilliant.
certainly somebody that comes up a lot. So the thing that I'm most concerned about in the immediate term, the 2024 election, the thing that I'm worried about is that people will do deepfake videos, and it is distressing to me, one, how good they are.
Yeah.
And two, if you know what you're looking for, you can usually tell pretty quickly what's fake and what's real. But the average person can't, doesn't know. And I'll see a video come across my X feed that clearly is a deep fake, and people are riled up in the comments as if it's real. And I'm like, the barrage of things that will come will be brutal.
I have to tell you a funny story. So, my podcast, it's called Moonshots, and it's been fun. And I've focused mostly on interviewing entrepreneurs who are taking big moonshots in the world, folks who want to, do amazing things, and their stories of getting there and the difficulties and how they overcome them and such. About 3 months ago, my team created an avatar of me.
I saw the interview.
And I interviewed myself, and I was blown away. I call it Peter Bot. And it's both visual. It looks like me. It moves its arms around. It sounds like me.
Its lips are in sync.
It's trained on all of my books and all my blogs. And so, and it's great. And I'm really proud of that interview. And I said it did a better job and as a orator and as someone communicating my ideas than I did. It was amazing. And I asked it to talk about what were the downside scenarios of deep fakes and tell me a story. And it instantly whipped up a story about a young female politician who is running for election, and the opponent creates a deep fake of her, and information gets out there. And despite the fact that it's not true, the story starts spreading virally, and her ability to overcome it when it's out of the gate was impossible. And that is problematic.
Yep. Lies go around the world faster than the truth could put on its shoes. Yeah.
I love that saying.
Oh my God, that's terrifying. Yeah, I think that's exactly what's going to happen. You said something earlier. You said people are playing for real or for keeps, or I forget the exact phrase you used, but that is true. Right now, people are playing for all the marbles. So one, I would like to see the blockchain used to watermark, somehow signify this thing is real.
I think it's the most important technology for that. And it's actually the most important use of blockchain. You know, I've always been like, okay, besides like Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies and so forth, what's blockchain really going to be valuable for? I think it's truth authentication.
Yes, correct. This thing is real. Obviously, cryptocurrency, the blockchain has become incredibly divisive. Some people are totally for it. And as, again, somebody developing games, I'm like right at the intersection of people hate or love this technology. But if I could get them to understand it's just a technology, it lets you do a thing.
Yes.
And so what is that thing that it lets you do? And what it does is it brings the laws of physics to the virtual world. And if tomorrow is going to be more virtual than today, and it is, then you better have something that brings some of the laws of physics, like the ability to say, okay, I can authenticate this thing. So sitting across from you now, obviously, I don't have any concerns about whether you're real or not. And for a very long time, it was, well, a picture or a video, that's easy. And then it became, well, a picture you can fake, but video is still real. And now it's, okay, even video, man, is super easy to fake. And so that becomes really disconcerting. And if we don't have a way to market and say, this thing is real, this thing is not, and make it ubiquitous so that when it shows up on my feed, it is self-evident. This one is real and this one is fake.
What is the blue check equivalent, right?
Exactly. And so that to me becomes really, really important. To your point about the election being patient zero, it's like, this is coming right now.
It is
right
here.
now. This is not a tomorrow problem. This is a 2-day problem. And given who's running, this is going to be a nightmare. And so I am super worried. And when you look at Ray Dalio, who's up to the last prediction I saw was 40% likelihood of civil war in the US, 50% likelihood of a global world war. And so it's like, whoa, like these are terrifying odds.
Yes. They are. And it's the human element that's at stake here, right? It's humans doing this to themselves. It's
correct.
One of the important things that people need to realize is technology is not inherently evil. It's how humans utilize the technology. And we have so much to live for and so much potential ahead of us, right? Infinite adjacent potentials. You know, when I think about why AI is important, it may well be to navigate all this stuff. I don't know that we humans are able to. I don't know, given all of the complexities of politics and social beliefs and distrusts, you know, is there some means by which a more brilliant, more capable, more gentle AI is able to step in and support us during this transition period? It's a conversation that's out there, and one we're thinking about. We talk about AI being the massive disruptor. Can it be the massive stabilizer as well?
Being able to communicate effectively is critically important. Whether you're a manager, a CEO, an entrepreneur, Grammarly can help you have a greater impact at work with better and faster everyday communication. Grammarly is an AI writing partner that's trusted by tens of millions of professionals, and 96% of them report that Grammarly helps them craft more impactful writing. From ideating on video titles or product names to summarizing long documents and replying to client emails better and faster than ever before. All of these AI features are for free, and they work where you work. It literally works across over 500,000 apps and websites. Make your point and have a greater impact with Grammarly. Sign up now and download Grammarly for free at grammarly.com/impact theory. That's grammarly.com/impact theory.
Let me paint a scenario for you. And as somebody with, are your kids 11 now?
My kids are 12.
12? As somebody with,
for those listening, 2 fraternal twin boys. Yeah.
yes, somebody that has kids who this will impact, I'll be very interested to get your take on this. So, I am actively building an artificial world with artificial characters that, as the technology matures, we can't do this yet, but this will be real very quickly. I want to build characters that you have a real relationship with, that you get to know, they get to know you, they react differently to you, they have memory. And when I think technology has really created a loneliness epidemic for a lot of people. But ironically, I think technology is going to be the solve for that loneliness. Now the question becomes, will it be a better or worse world? That remains to be seen. But with my optimistic hat on, I think people's best friends, certainly in 10 years from now, most people's best friend will be an AI. In 20 years, barring just absolute nuclear catastrophe, like for sure, or biological weapon, that's probably more likely. That seems a certainty. And so people will have friendships that are AI, but they'll also have romantic relationships and even potentially, this one freaks me out, but potentially sexual relationships with AI. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that we're going to have relationships with AIs that are intimate because they know you better than you know yourself. Literally. Right. I'm writing. I just finished my chapters on AI in Age of Abundance, and I'm working on the humanoid robot chapters today. And so AIs will, in fact, you're going to give permission to your AIs to listen to your phone calls, read your emails, watch what you're eating, watch what you're doing. And you're going to do it openly, because when you give it that permission, it can help you in an amazing fashion, right? So it'll remember everyone you've forgotten. So when the person's approaching you, it'll be, my favorite, right? You'll know the kid's birthday and so forth. If you want to, follow my diet recommendations, it will, for your AR glasses, it will tell you don't eat that, or it'll have pre-ordered for you at the restaurant. It'll listen to your conversation, so it'll remind you of everything. And people go, I don't want it knowing this stuff. I mean, well, come on, be serious. I mean, Alexa is listening in your bedroom right now. Google knows everything you've searched for. Microsoft knows everything on your email. Apple knows all of your, I mean, if you think you have privacy today, don't fool yourself.
Also, here's what I would invite people to think about. Imagine, because right now they're thinking about Jeff Bezos knowing what they're up to, or Larry Page knowing what they're up to. That doesn't feel good. But if you think of it this way, hey, Peter, you just got into an argument with your wife, and I see from your Oura Ring that your blood pressure has gone up. Obviously you've invited me to listen into these things. Here's a perspective you might want to take. If you remember, she's very sensitive to this, and you said that, and that, might have been what set her off. But look, hey, I totally understand where you're coming from. I see your position 100%.
Super empathic.
Exactly.
Super empathic. In fact, there was a study recently done. It was published in JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association, something like that, in a study of humans and AIs giving advice to patients, the AIs were like 10 times more empathic than the humans. And another study looking at therapists, you're more likely to be open and honest with an AI than a human therapist, because the AI is not going to judge you.
Yep. You can also tailor the AI. I don't want you to try to solve the problem, AI. I just want you to understand my feelings.
Yes. Yeah.
and it will do as told.
So it's going to be interesting, but I think that AI, if the AI has access to the backward looking cameras on augmented goggles so it can see where your eyes are looking, and if it sees me staring for an extra microsecond at a logo on your shirt, that shows curiosity. Or if it sees my eye avert from something that I don't like, that is so much information. That's almost subconscious information to you, right? If you're looking to buy clothing and you see it knows from a conversation you had with a friend that you're looking to find a new blazer. And so you look an extra few seconds at a guy's blazer as they're walking by, and it may say, do you like that? And you're like, I do. It says, okay, I'll order it for you, right? So it's like knowing the ability for it to know you more intimately than you are honestly willing to know yourself is there. And that will build an extraordinary relationship.
Yeah. And for better or worse, here is the human psyche at work. If you have a friend who effectively lives to understand you, to feel your pain, to
laugh
know
at
what
all
you're
your
going
jokes
through
over and over again.
Yes. Like you will feel seen. There is something so wonderful about feeling
It goes
seen
back
and
to that
understood.
conversation about, is there someone in your life who knows you intimately and doesn't judge you?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, it is a level of connection that few people know.
And yeah, I think we'll also be able to give the AI a personality so that it isn't. I was thinking about this when you were talking about how we will all become the Borg,
yeah.
And
kinder, gentler Borg.
Yes. And I was thinking, it's interesting because the way that we individualize ends up being a really cool part of the human experience, that my wife has a unique perspective, that she sees the world in a certain way that is complementary to the way that I see the world, makes her an incredible partner. And I don't want her to be exactly like I am. So I don't want my AI companion to be a mirror. That's not interesting. I want my AI companion to be that perfectly tailored, complementary thing to me so that they're siding with me at times, but then other times they're sort of pulling me along.
And by the way, you can fracture that AI into 5 different personalities, all who know you well.
Also true. Wow. I never thought of that.
One is sensual and sexual. One is funny.
Oh my God.
One is funny. One is pushing you to do better. One is commiserating with you.
Here, this is going to get weird.
It is going to get weird, very fast.
I love that. You just gave me an idea for a story. That is so interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. I want to see this world. And for those who say, oh my God, slow down, I don't want to see it, I like the way it is right now. I hate to say this, there's no velocity knob on this technological world. There's no on-off switch. It is moving at lightning speed. Our job is to steer it, to navigate, to inspire and guide it. Right, to avoid that 40% civil war or 50% world war, all of those things. Because on the back end of this, I do believe there's a stabilized society and a world of extraordinary abundance out there. I don't think we have a choice. We're evolving. We're evolving very rapidly. So, bringing this back, I mean, the work that we do at the XPRIZE Foundation is trying to evolve, to guide, to create that positive world of the future and guide us and guide where entrepreneurs invest their time and energy in a positive world. So, I mean, it's fun. We've launched now $400 million in XPRIZEs.
Whoa.
Which have driven, on the at least $4 billion in R&D. And what we're trying to do at the XPRIZE is say, this is what's possible in the year 2040 in energy, in health, in education, right? Education is another massively about to be transformed world. I'll come back to that in a minute. And saying, okay, what's the roadmap to get there? And what are the breakthroughs we need to get there? So I mentioned earlier of two 12-year-old boys. I don't think the educational system is getting them ready for the world that's coming at them.
What would they need to be ready?
Not the stuff they're learning in school right now. I've set up a meeting. I won't mention my kids go to a very super high-end, amazing private school in Santa Monica, and but it's based on the traditional old educational system, right? So this past year, they learned the 50 capitals of the U.S. states. And I'm like, that's why God created Google. I would rather you, and so I wrote a blog. I put out 2 blogs a week, and folks can get it at diamandis.com. But I put out a blog on what the schools need to be teaching kids today. And part of it was, this is what I think. And then I asked, ChatGPT what we need to teach our kids. And it was very, very similar. And it's not memorization, right? So it's how to ask great questions. It's finding your passion, discovering that, and really diving deep into that, whether it's developing video games or whether it's, space, which it was for me. Video games is for my kids. It is learning how to argue your point, how to be a great leader, how to be empathic, right? These are some fundamentals. Maybe it's more philosophy than anything else. And it's not what we're teaching our kids today. So what is the world like? My dad didn't want to buy me a calculator when I was growing up so I could learn, basics. And I ended up getting a calculator and learning how to program on it. But what's the world like inside of 5 years where everything is intelligent? Everything is imbued with intelligence. You're talking to your refrigerator, your car, their desk, chair, whatever it is, right? Intelligence is innate in all physical things. And where even more than that, AI has achieved and exceeded human level intelligence. Right? So this whole concept of AGI, artificial general intelligence, Ray Kurzweil predicted we would have it in 2029. He made that prediction in 1999,
Whoa.
30 years early. And guess what? Everyone is agreeing on that date.
Wow.
His predictions are amazing. So Elon's predicting like 2028. I just saw yesterday the CEO of NVIDIA predicted it's within 5 years, which is 28, 29. So what happens when AI, human level AI, your best teachers, your best diagnosticians are all AIs? And an AI teacher knows your child's favorite color, movie star, sports, understands their grasp of language, understands that they're tactile learners versus visual versus auditory, where I can enter a virtual world that is spun up instantly. We just saw a stability AI, right, with stable diffusion, being able to create imagery instantly from just typing. And I'm learning about Plato or Socrates or ancient Saudi Arabia or ancient Egypt, and I'm living in a virtual world for me. And I'm walking around and meeting people, and my inquisitiveness is driving me to want to learn more. And I think it's going to be awesome. But it's very different from today.
It's very different from today. One of the things that when you were talking about the calculator and your dad wanted to make sure that you were able to do the basics in your head, do you consider AI cheating?
No more than having a book is cheating compared to what we had before books, which was memorizing text, right? When the printing press came out, this art of storytelling started going away. I think AI is a new superpower and how we utilize it. Now, the big challenge is how do we reconnect purpose in our life? I think what you're jumping to there is if love writing, which I do. I get up every morning and I write for an hour. It's like my precious time. If I can write for 2 hours, I will, before hitting the gym or before taking the kids to school. So I love writing, and I love that experience of like a well-written paragraph. But what happens when I can say, hey, listen, write a book called Age of Abundance, click.
Yep.
I mean, it's like, it's kind of empty. It's like, okay, yeah, I published a book along with the other trillion books that are published today, and it's meaningless. So we're going to have to reconnect meaning in other ways. So a purpose-driven life is so critically important.
How much do you think the world is going to fragment? So when everybody can publish a book, when everybody can make a video game, when everybody can write their own movie,
it becomes less valuable. So what happens then? I think we have to find value in different ways. I think we have to go after bigger challenges. I mean, I do believe a good
going
amount of
after
our
bigger challenges because it will re-aggregate people.
because it will re-inspire people. I think our biology needs challenge. I think one future is one in which we're just living in games, and we find our purpose and our challenges in game universes.
Yeah. I think Ready Player One is the inevitable future.
Yeah.
So, but I'm talking about something slightly different. So here's the thing, as an entrepreneur, I think about this a lot. You say, if you want to make $1 billion, help 1 billion people.
Yeah.
I don't know that will be a thing in the future. I think 10, certainly 20 years from now, everything is so hyper individualized that when I log into Netflix, which of course won't exist, but let's just pretend it makes it easier for people to think. When I log into Netflix and I'm scrolling, it's going to be making the movies based on where my eye lingered for a little bit longer.
Well, the conversation you had an hour ago, right? So you're pissed, or you're just having the most amazing day. What's your emotional status right now, based upon your emotional feelings or who you're with? You want to pick a movie that is going to like relax you or inspire you or make you laugh, whatever the case might be. And this process of like Googling or randomly walking into it, instead, the movie will be teed up and ready to go.
Correct. And it will be so individualized. There won't be this sense of shared experience, except for the fact that I'll create a sense of shared experience because my 17 AI personalities will all have experienced it with me and watched it and have their take. But now I'm not, going back to when I'm thinking as an entrepreneur, I started thinking, whoa, it's going to be very hard for me to build a big business because I'm going to pick, it will inevitably be just a really deep niche. So I'll make something for, to use Kevin Kelly's idea of 1,000 true fans.
Yes.
And now everybody is making something just for 1,000 true fans because everything is bifurcated. So I'm making video games in an anime style for fans of vampire fiction that's in rhyming couplets.
And by the way, your AI is producing 10,000 of those individualized variations for the 10,000 raving subgroups.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what do you think that does to entrepreneurship in general?
I wish I knew. I think we're going from mind to materialization. I think we're going from deciding you want something to seeing it instantly created. And it's gonna get there hyper fast. Whatever you desire is going to be enabled in ways that are shocking. So how do we give value? Because a lot of times we give value to the struggle of I worked really hard to find this thing, and I found this unique piece of whatever it is, or I worked hard to get to that point. Mm-hmm. And when the struggle is gone, what does that mean?
I think you've already answered the question. This is why I think Ready Player One is inevitable. So Ready Player One imagines a world that is dystopian. And so you create a far more enjoyable reality. But I think there's also, let's say that you make a utopian world, you will still end up in Ready Player One because you're going to need to create a world that's hard. Because until you augment the human mind, we will, I think there's a formula that evolution is guaranteed that we will pursue, which is that you must work really hard to gain a set of skills that matter to you for whatever reason that allow you to serve yourself and others. And you will need all of those pieces. And you will pursue anything and everything until you get those things to slot in place, which is exactly why video games are the all-consuming medium.
Let me take you on a short journey over 3 billion years.
Please.
And give some vision of where things might go on a single trajectory. The Earth forms 4.5 billion years ago. The earliest life forms were somewhere in the 4 billion to 3 billion single cell life forms without a nucleus. These are prokaryotic life. And as they advance, they go from prokaryotic life to eukaryotic life. That meant they incorporated technology into them, mitochondria, Golgi apparatus, and plasma reticulum, nuclear structures. They became more capable as individual cells of supporting energy and information. Then those prokaryotic cells, now more capable individual cells, became multicellular. And then those multicellular life forms started differentiating into life forms that were not just multicellular, but subspecialized cells, tissues, and organs, and eventually evolved to us. So there's a direct line between these very simple individual cells and you and I at 40 trillion cells. I think in the same way that we went from prokaryotic to eukaryotic life by taking technology in, mitochondria and plasma reticulum, nuclear structures and so forth, that allowed us to use energy and information more effectively, we humans are the equivalent of that early prokaryotic life. We're about to take in technology into ourselves that's going to allow us to connect with each other the same way those individual cells became multicellular lives. And so we're going to become this meta-intelligence where I'm going to connect with 8 billion people. And my experience of life is no longer a single ego. I'm now part of a much larger intelligence, a meta-intelligence that's conscious on a brand new level.
When I think about the dangers related to AI, and I'm not going to, I think AI is the most important tool humanity has ever created to solve all of our biggest problems.
No doubt.
Period, exclamation point, big, bright letters. Having said that, are there dangers? So the dangers can simply break down into 3 different groups. One, at one end, is AI becomes conscious and decides to squash us and step on us. I find that very unlikely and a ridiculous thesis. I think people have just seen this in Hollywood way too much. I think the more intelligent something is, honestly, the more loving and kind and pro-life it will be.
Why? Why
That's
would that
my
be true?
belief. It is my belief I have, other than I see humanity becoming as a whole over time. If you look at the numbers, right, and we've looked at this from abundance, warfare reducing massively over time, violent death reducing massively over time, access to freedom increasing over time. I mean, the numbers over 1,000 years, not over the last 5, 10, 20 years, but over 1,000 years. And that's come from educating each other with books and transportation connecting us across the world, and globalization and interdependence. All of these things have led to, it's hard to remember this watching the Crisis News Network, right? CNN every day that's broadcasting every murder on the planet to you over and over and over again. It's shaping our neural nets. Our brains are neural nets that we teach from example after example. And I don't watch the news, right? I don't want some editor telling me about yet another murder or crooked politician. Got it. And it isn't showing us a fair and balanced view of what's actually going on in the world. The incredible science and technology and humanitarian acts, all of these things.
Yeah.
Anyway, so one phase is AGI, artificial general intelligence.
Before you move off that though, so what you're describing is human intelligence. And so this is...
And societal intelligence.
I don't quite know what you mean by that.
And what I mean is that societal norms, organizing around the United Nations.
Yes, but
people
all born of this meat suit. The brain works in a certain way, and AI will not work in that same way. I have no reason to believe that AI will work in that same way.
Very likely won't.
It works differently.
Very good point.
At the end of the day, when we have these crazy Hollywood scripts that AI is going to usurp us for our heat from the Matrix. I love the Matrix. They failed on that use of human bodies. I'm sorry. I don't know if you agree with me on that.
I do agree with you, and I don't know well enough what their original intention was, but according to them,
yes,
they were forced by the studio to give a more simplistic answer. So I let them off the hook for...
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
But, we're coming to get your water on this planet. Listen, whatever we have on this planet is infinite in the universe. We are a speck, a crumb in a universe filled with resources. And so AI doesn't need to, squash humanity to get these resources. So AGI at its extreme, artificial general intelligence at its extreme, I don't believe is going to be dystopian in itself. In the middle term, what I would call the terrible twos or the teenage years, maybe there is a case to be made that in the beginning AI hasn't reached full sentience, doesn't understand the power of its tools. Maybe there's a case that, it's the baby picking up a rock and throwing it at the window, not understanding what it's,
a teenager with a BB gun and a squirrel.
Yes.
That's the best.
But the third element, which is the most likely, is the malevolent individual. It's the bad actors using technology. And so sometime in the next 18 months, 2 years, there may well be not a retrovirus released, but an AI virus that goes out and shuts down power plants or shuts down Wall Street and something and causes a economic hurdle. That's not the AI. Those are the humans using that tool, just to be very clear. There's a great book by Mo Gadot called Scary Smart. Came out about a year ago. Do you know the book?
I haven't read the book, but I had Mo on the show recently.
Yeah, Mo is fantastic. And he basically says, listen, I want you to think about AI as a child we're giving birth to as humanity. And that child is being taught by its parents. Now, if you think about Superman, who lands in Kansas, wherever he landed, and he's picked up by the Kents, and it's a loving family, he learns good ethics and morals, and he becomes a superhero for good. What if Superman had landed in the Bronx and part of a drug lord ring, and had become the supervillain?
You make me want to write that story. As soon as you started, I was like, wait a second.
There's a great plot there. Right
So
now.
the question is, we humans, how are we teaching this new life form coming into existence?
I like Neil Jacobs' framing, which is he goes, okay, you're worried about an AI getting more and more access to information, becoming autonomous, making its own decisions, and starting to run amok out in the world. We go, yeah. He goes, we have a precedent for that. We call them children. And we raise kids, and we figured out ways of giving them timeouts or jail or whatever. And he thinks constructively that we think we'll find ways of bounding what AIs can do. Now,
So
he
I'm
may
going
be
to push you
wrong.
on that. How?
He may be wrong. I'm not sure I agree with him.
Yeah, that seems super naive to me. So when I am optimistic by nature, and my default setting is just, hey, this is all going to work out somehow. And as soon as we wrap this episode, I'm going to be pushing my team to integrate AI more. I'm going to be paying more money for AI and just feeding that beast. But at the same time, it does give me pause as I try to think through like how you really deal with the alignment problem. So to me, there's two really big dangers for AI. Danger number one, and this is the one that scares me the most, but I'm going to set it aside for a minute. And that's just humans lose meaning and purpose. Just AI can do everything better than they can. It just becomes so defeating that you're just like, oh God, like I've worked really hard to get good at this thing. Like this, I tell this story all the time. I can't remember if I've told it in an episode, but I employ a bunch of artists. And I once sat with one of them, and for like an hour, he was just trying to get the perfect like semicircle, and he was just doing it over and over and over and over. And at the time I thought, oh man, yeah, like you've got to do that. Like to be able to articulate what's in his mind, he has to be able to control his hand. And I was like, wow, I really get that. Now I'm like, you wasted your time. Like AI can do that, like does not even have to think about it. And he is an anomaly. So he runs out and he's now learning how to use AI to do some of the tasks that we want to do artistically. Okay, amazing. We'll set that aside for now, meaning and purpose. The other one is the paperclip problem. So now you just have, like, when I think about what will a machine end up optimizing for, my gut instinct is, unless you go way out of your way to get really clever, they will optimize for efficiency of reward. So whatever you tell it is the thing to go for. We'll call that the reward. And then it's just going to find the most efficient way to get to that. And so we have to be so careful about how we define, but don't X, Y, Z. And then to the idea of it being like a child, yes, but it's like a child that has access to nuclear capabilities.
You need to build in ethics and morals as a fundamental in that situation, so it doesn't use world supplies to build a infinite number of paper clips. And it's true. And we have a limited time to do that in. I think Google developed sort of large language models in 2017, 2018, and didn't release them.
Because they were worried?
They wanted to build the framework first, and they were maybe overthinking it. It's interesting. We were talking about YouTube just before the show here. Google had Google videos going way before YouTube. And Google videos wasn't succeeding. I think it was just too many lawyers involved in, well, you can't show that, you can't do this. And then Chad Hurley starts YouTube on his credit cards, and then Google buys it 18 months later for $1.65 billion. Right? Why? Because, Google videos was like a linear and YouTube was like exploding exponentially. And they jumped on that. And so there's a question of, which path do you take? Do you take the careful path, or do you take the path of least resistance? And unfortunately, we humans tend to take the path of least resistance.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say unfortunately. And this is where I really get, I don't know how to think through the problem of AI, because when I heard Elon's assessment of it, which is that AI is basically a demon summoning circle, and we're summoning it like crazy despite his best efforts to get people to slow down. And I can't bring myself, like when people signed the, hey, we should stop thing, my immediate response was this is a one-way street.
It's
like,
so far out of the bag.
Yeah, like it does not make sense. Like you could slow it down in a region, but you're not going to be able to slow it down full stop. And so I'm really of two minds. I am both like, I think this is going to be amazing, and yet how does this not end the human race? Like I'm not sure.
Well, the question is whether the human race is the end all and be all, right?
Yeah, but don't you feel weird even saying that out loud?
Well, no, because we have been evolving on this planet for 3.5, life started 500 million after the Earth started. So 4 billion years we've been evolving. And we went from prokaryotes to eukaryotes to multicellular life forms to eventually primates and now humans. We're a step in the transitory process. Now, I'd like to preserve our steps. By the way, the same thing is true for climate control or climate crisis, right? It's like the climate's always been changing throughout human history. We're changing it now, but what we really want is the climate to stay the way it's been for the last couple hundred years, because that's where we built our cities. So we just want to freeze the way the world is right now. And I understand that, and we should do that with climate to the maximum of our ability. But we also want to freeze evolution. Now, one of the scenarios, of course, is we're going to merge with technology, and we are, right? All of us have our cell phones within meters of our body, and I'd implant it in my brain if I could. And so the question is, are we going to upload ourselves? Are we going to, create brain-computer interfaces that allows me to think in Google and know quantum physics? I'd love it. I mean, I would do it. A lot of people won't, but we're speciating what we're doing.
I think of this very simply. We the negative side of us, the amygdala side, the media, etc. You end up with the Skynet Matrix type of Terminator scenario. If we're lucky, we're pets. If we're unlucky, we're food. Right? Kind of goes that way.
Cheers.
You don't see that in actuality. As we develop technology, we augment the human experience with technology. We don't replace it. Is what we've seen in how we build. Now, I think of the resolution of this as a symmetry problem. we're assuming that some AI will become malevolent and then do horribly damaged things, and we have no power to control it. Let's also not forget that we have the equal opportunity to say to an AI, hey, if you see something bad, fight it. So what you'll end up with is AI is trying to do bad stuff and AI is trying to do good stuff, fighting it out. And I think that's where we'll end up. And over time, we'll figure out, okay, we've got to give more resources over here or over there, and we'll work it out. So
you mentioned,
we always end up with this asymmetry assumption, and I think that's the wrong assumption.
You mentioned the movie Her.
I did not.
Oh, you did not? Okay, well, let me mention
I'm glad
it. So
you are.
it's one of my favorite science fiction AI movies, right? If you haven't seen it,
Fantastic.
those listening. And it's an AI basically evolves as a personal assistant. And it's a story about a guy who's depressed, who falls in love with his AI, who helps him get over his depression. And that's sort of like the underlying story. But towards the end of the movie, what occurs is the AI announces that they're leaving. We're sort of like bored with you here in humanity. We're off to explore the universe, which I think is a much more likely scenario, that an advanced enough AI has no reason to hurt humanity. In fact, every reason to potentially protect us and support us as its creator. But we're living, it's interesting, right? The Webb Space Telescope is teaching us about we're 100 billion stars per galaxy, and we're in a universe of on the order of 2 to 20 trillion galaxies, right? It's insane. There's a massive amount out there. Now,
this is where the final piece of this is the mindset. We're always coming at this from a scarcity mindset, a zero-sum game mindset. When you see that there's infinite energy and infinite capability out there, then an AI is going to go, okay, where am I going to find the easiest thing? It's going to be out there, and they're going to go find it. Solar energy, they'll build solar plants, and they'll get all the energy you need from that.
Now, I know that you know physics well. So are you making the base assumption that AI, once it hits super intelligence, will be able to solve for folding time and space, and so it's trivial to get to wherever it needs to go?
Now we need psychedelics to process this conversation. Who knows? I believe that those are kind of constructs that keep us in three-dimensional management.
But that seems to be writing in that comment that would almost need to be true for that argument to make sense.
Or I would say, if you're looking for a massive amount of the rare earth elements to build chips, or the ability to capture as much solar, it's not going to be on the surface of the earth. You'd go to the asteroids, which are planetary cores, and you'd mine the materials there. You'd set up your solar collection, around the orbit of Mercury. You'd optimize around that. Now,
you engineer around it. You find substitutes. People say, "Oh my God, solar panels! But there's only so many silicon panels we can build, etc., etc." Well, there's a new material called perovskite, which is like almost just like a salt. It's abundant, conducts solar energy, and we're learning now how to leverage that. We won't need solar panels.
It's cheap.
It's those S
40%,
curves,
right?
that Ray talks about that I think come into play here, and just keep progressing us.
You're gonna have to walk people through an S curve and who Ray is.
An S curve is a typical exponential growth curve. So in the beginning, we saw the first computers use relays, and you would have slow deceptive growth. They'd go into this exponential growth where they'd start skyrocketing, and then they'd run out of capability and they'd fall off, and it made like a letter S. But while you're using relays to design and use your computers, you use those computers to create the next generation of computers, which used vacuum tubes. And the vacuum tubes could then take over from the relays, and then the vacuum tubes ran out of capability, and the transistor came on, and then the integrated circuit came, and then the multi-dimensional integrated circuit came. So basically, one technology runs out of steam, but enables you to build on the next technology. And so those are S curves, or nested S curves.
This was the basis of Ray's observation of
Ray
the law,
Kurzweil.
Ray Kurzweil,
yeah.
the law of accelerating returns, that if you have an information-based paradigm, once you start a doubling pattern, it just keeps going because these nested S-curves hop from technology to technology to technology. We're reaching the end of the life cycle of integrated circuits now. If you read the press, everybody's like, oh, it's the end of Moore's law, that's it, etc. And that article's been coming out for 60 years, and we keep finding ways around it. Now we have a bunch of technologies clustering at the edge of that: 3D chip design, optical computing, quantum computing, etc., that are ready to take it to the next level. And so we find this consistently in technology. Once you see that doubling pattern starting, it just keeps going. And this Ray's has one of the few brains that can kind of look out and say, this is what's going to happen if we push this limit.
Just a moment more about Ray. So Ray is, first of all, he wrote the foreword to our new book, Exponential Organizations 2.0. He is co-founder of Singularity University with us. He is director of engineering. He's the futurist at Google, which is, will say something unto itself, right? And he realized that the law of accelerating returns is this idea that technology, since the stone axe, has enabled the next generation of technology and the next generation technology, and it just keeps going. I think most important to realize is he's got, if you look on Wikipedia, he's got a published 86% accuracy rate in predicting the future, which is crazy. So his prediction is important for this conversation. Human level AI by 2029, right? Which means that a day later it's superhuman AI. Brain-computer interface being high bandwidth, connecting your neocortex, 100 billion neurons in your brain, to the cloud in the early 2030s, right? So those are two important points.
The key thing, and by the way, our chatbot that interfaces with our book to make it a living book, we talked to Ray, and we're going to rename the chatbot Ray K, because he was the pioneer of so much of this technology and thinking. So now people will interact with things in a different way. And the whole challenge is, it's like building businesses in the 20th century. You were building on a scarcity model, and you built top-down hierarchical pyramid-style command and control structures to grab a market, grab as much market share as you could, figure out ways of launching new products and services in that market, etc. And all of that worked really well in the 20th century. As we have an information-based world, we need to architect our organizations in totally different ways. And this is the big differentiator between old-style organizations, linear, versus exponential organizations. And we now have the data to show that this is a pervasive paradigm that will be around. The book's been out for close to 10 years now.
The original,
right?
The original book,
EXO book, which Peter and I kind of collaborated deeply on back then. And so now we've got this definition and a model for how do you organize in a world of exponential technologies. And a great kind of example of this is the music industry. You used to have 8 major music studios selling cassettes, selling CDs, selling a scarcity model, right? $10 an album or whatever. And then you digitize music. All the 8 pretty much disappear. And now you have 2 platforms, iTunes and Spotify, selling you abundance on a subscription model. It's very clear that healthcare, education, transportation, energy will all follow the same path. And we're starting to see it now. Teslas with, you'll be picked up and pay per kilometer to be taken somewhere. Uber's kind of broaching the edges of that. So we see industry after industry moving to this new model. And what we've been identifying and gathering the data on is what are the attributes and characteristics of this model.
So before we dive too deep into that, I want to go back to this idea of what you call it, speciation?
Speciation, yes.
So there was, as far as I can tell from Elon's own words, there was a bit of a breakup between him and Larry Page where
I was there.
Really? And so what Elon said was basically when he said that I was being a speciesist by saying... Speciesist. By saying that, I didn't just want to hand things over to AI. Yeah. That's where he was like, okay, wait, this has gone too far. And that's why when you said that was how I responded. It was like, whoa, like I get it, but there is something uncomfortable about the idea of sort of saying that we're passé. I don't know the right way to phrase it.
That we're evolving, and we have been and are evolving. We're going from evolution by natural selection, which is Darwinism, to evolution by human direction, by whatever you want to call that. What does that mean? Well, we've been doing it right now. We have been evolving all of our crops, right? We take biology and make it do our bidding. an ear of corn today compared to what it was, 500 years ago. It's ridiculous. The ear of corn looked like a scraggly little, I don't know.
Yeah, it was 1 inch long.
1 inch long, and I hear this giant ear of corn, or I look at these giant strawberries we have, or the
chickens.
species of dogs, or the chickens we have. You know how many chickens are on the planet today?
I do not.
38 billion chickens.
Whoa.
Holy moly, right?
Wow.
Amazing. Anyway, that's an aside. But
a lot of
so we have been evolving everything. We humans have a huge footprint on this planet, and we're evolving ourselves. We're evolving. I mean, I outsource much of my cognitive ability to my phone or ChatGPT or Google, whatever the case might be. And it is happening. You can go and live in the forest and not use any tech if you want, but very few people do that. So what does this mean? If you have a choice to be able to do a number of things to enhance your ability, right? A lot of my work, as you well know, is in extending the healthy human lifespan. How do I add 20, 30 healthy years of my life to intercept the technologies that's going to reverse our aging, right? And that's a whole nother conversation. And I believe we're going to get there. But I also want to increase my cognitive capacity. So my phone, I'll hold up my phone here, right? When I use my phone to do something interesting, like look at images and faces and translate or whatever, my phone gathers the information and then it sends the information on the 5G network to the edge of the cloud where the hard work is done, and the answer comes back to the phone. The processing isn't done necessarily on the phone, it's done on the cloud. And in the same way, right now, we have a limited size of our brains, 100 billion neurons, 100 trillion synaptic connections, and our brains can't get bigger, otherwise our moms would not give birth to us. But what we can do is we can do the same thing our phones do and send our desires, our interests to the cloud, have it processed and get the answer back. And so that is one future for brain-computer interface. Another future is we take our essence and upload it to the cloud. I don't know when.
What problem does that solve for you, though?
Well, actually, it gives you scale and pace, because our brains are limited here, right? And our memories are limited here without any augmentation. And this has been happening actually for about 40 or 50 years. If you look at the internet, the first thing we did was we put the world's data on the internet. It's now the memory of the world. Now with all the sensors, the internet has become the nervous system for the world. So we're like basically extending the organism outside the human species into this thing called the internet. As we add more processing and move our brains to it, now you all have an AI and a totally new speciation type of thing. Now you can get worried about that or afraid of that or freaked out about it, or you can say, natural process has been going on for billions of years. This is just another step in that process.
Man, you guys, it's interesting. This really hits you guys differently than it hits me.
Yeah.
Okay, so talk to me. I don't intuitively agree about the internet becoming our nervous system. Help me understand that.
So when you need to remember something, you want a memory. So you want information stored somewhere that you can retrieve. And now with all the servers that we have around the world, we have access. Wikipedia, for example, we have access to the world. The next step, if I step on a nail, a memory doesn't help me. I need a nervous system to say lift foot, scream, run for a Band-Aid. So the instant response and the agility of response, you need a nervous system for.
This is Uber, calling your Uber as part of the nervous system, right? This is sending an email or making a phone call and asking,
Or an XPRIZE team sensing a wildfire and going, quick, put it out right away, right? So this is...
That feels super accurate, okay.
So real-time sensing, and our bodies operate like this. Our cells have receptors, and they're scanning for things. And when the right thing comes by, they pick it up. There's a whole bunch of information theory around this.
Do you see this happening at the individual level or at the societal level?
It's a
Because the
systemic...
wildfire thing, that feels...
Let me give you a
It's a
version
systemic
of this.
thing.
We're heading towards a world of 1 trillion sensors, right? Your phone has dozens of sensors on it right now. An autonomous Waymo, Google's autonomous car driving down the road, is got LiDAR and radar and cameras, and it's picking up gigabits of data as it goes down the road. Everything is being imaged, right? So I want you to imagine you're a fashion designer and you want to decide what your next fashion show should have and what is trending. You could go and ask your AI, listen, look at the cameras on Madison Avenue and tell me what's trending in terms of fashion right now as people are walking down the street. What colors, what's hem length, what hats, whatever. And now, can you correlate that to any kind of ad campaign that's occurred in the last few months to see a signal to noise ratio? Again, we're heading towards a world where you can know anything you want, anytime you want, anywhere you want. How's that hit you?
That one gets me excited. So when I think about it
So that's
from
the
a
nervous
game
system.
developer's standpoint, which is maybe different. I don't know how this plays into what you guys are thinking about, but here's the fantasy that I live in, that the only thing that keeps me awake at night is how quickly someone else is going to do something even cooler. But right now I feel like I have the coolest take on this, which is that I'm sure you guys saw Google and Adobe announced Core AR, where basically everything that Google has mapped, which is everything but the ocean floor, you can now overlay AR 3D assets on that anywhere, and it's only going to get better. Insane. And so my whole thesis on gaming is that it becomes this thing I call borderless entertainment, where you'll hand the game back and forth from the console to reality and back. And so, once we've got our Apple AR glasses, I mean, it just will be...
By the way, coming soon.
Oh, for sure. Like in the next 6 months or something. Right?
No,
on
June 5th. Monday.
Oh, it's announced.
It's announced.
No.
Have they actually said it's the glasses though, or
Yes.
just do they have a big announcement?
No. I have a party I'm going to go and grab them and try them. You want to join me?
Yes. What?
Okay.
100%. I want to join you.
I will. I'm
Peter, I'm
co-hosting.
going to duct tape myself to your shin to make sure that you can't leave me behind.
Okay. You are invited.
Wow.
Luckily, he has two shins, so I'm going to come along.
The other one will leave free. Oh, no. Yeah, please. I'll give you some duct tape. That's insane. Yeah. So this gets very exciting. So the idea of being able to scan everything, read that data, is incredibly interesting. When it's humans in control and leveraging it to do something amazing, I love it the most. And the way that I see AI, the way that I sort of jokingly explain it, but I'm only half kidding, is that phase one is that there's going to be humans that learn how to use AI are going to just absolutely smash humans that rebel against it and don't use it. And so I'm certainly trying to be in that camp. Phase two is going to be what I'll call the temporary utopia, where it's like, hey, abundance, everything's amazing. And then phase three is we're all dead. And we're either all dead because something just goes absolutely horribly wrong, and you get the adversarial system loses once, and the catastrophic thing is so massive, or that we're just evolved out of the picture. And maybe not in a bad way. Maybe it's wonderful and we merge with technology or whatever. It's interesting. I can very easily put on an optimistic hat, but I have to take off my pessimistic hat to do it.
Yeah. Listen, here, first of all, let's take this back to reality. We're living in a game. This is a nth generation simulation.
Do you really believe that?
I really believe that. Fundamentally believe that.
Just the math says.
Just the reality.
I like your framing. You're like, the world is too goddamn interesting for this not to be a civilization.
We're at the 99th level of the game right now.
What
right?
are the odds?
And the ability, what I've seen. So I introduced you to Imad Mustak, right, and what he's doing at Stability, and being able to render, getting to a point very soon of rendering photorealistic video experiences that you can go into and live in. And the experiments that have been done by Google and Stanford on creating AI bots, instantiating them with a script and a story and letting them live. And have you heard about this?
Not all of it.
Where they basically created a bunch of AI bots and they put it into call it a digital box.
Hear, and they started like doing birthday parties.
They start dating and going on getting jobs and mimicking the things that we do in life right now. So this is the equivalent of Pong in the early days. So imagine combining these things in the future, and
That's all I think about.
You're going to put and you're going to put AIs that have full capabilities into virtual worlds, and they'll start evolving farming and then metallurgy, and then they'll start printing books, and then they'll start making computers, and then they'll evolve AI on their own, and they'll start involving their own bots inside. So the question is this the first time? And I think not. We're in a universe of, call it for rough numbers, 14 billion years. Man, oh man.
The Drake equation comes into play.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Well,
The Frank Drake was a scientist at NASA in the 50s, and NASA commissioned him to say, what's the probability of life out there somewhere? So he came up with what's now called the Drake equation, which was, okay, take most 2/3 of star systems seem to be binary stars, don't host a stable orbit, so ignore those. Of the 1/3 that's left, how many might have a planet in a Goldilocks where water doesn't permanently freeze or boil? Let's say that's 1 out of a million. Out of those, maybe 1 out of a billion gets to primordial ooze level, and 1 out of a million of those, a lightning bolt hits and you spark life. 1 out of a million of those may get to radio level technology, and 1 out of a million of those hasn't wiped itself out with nuclear weapons before it gets to the next stage of escaping the Earth type of thing. And so he came up with a bunch of factors saying, if you had, what's the likelihood of similar carbon-based radio technology life forms out in the universe? So that's one of our over billions and billions on the denominator. However, when you multiply it by the number of stars out there and by the number of galaxies out there, the pessimistic answer is there's 100% chance of radio level carbon-based technology life forms out in the universe. The optimistic one is it's actually right in our galaxy, right? And every time we learn more about the universe, how many stars there are, et cetera, turns out there's 100 times more stars that have stable planets around them than we thought.
We're discovering planets
Every
everywhere.
factor turns out to be 1,000 times better than we thought, and therefore you really end up with a Fermi paradox of, if there's intelligent life out there, why haven't we seen it?
Yeah. So the interesting,
And your guess is?
the interesting variable on the Drake equation was between the time that a intelligent species developed the ability to transmit interstellar, which is like I Love Lucy, leaving the Earth and heading out towards the galaxy. How long would that species exist before something happened to it? The dystopian point of view is that it blows itself up and it's only like 100 years or 50 years
Great
and so forth.
filter, yeah.
The positive point of view is that they transition to where radio is not, it's like we don't use smoke signals anymore because radio is so backwards.
The theory I like the most is called the transcension hypothesis by a guy called John Smart, who figures we'll get to AR level capability and VR level capability, and instead of going out into the universe, we go inwards.
100%.
And I think that's probably the likely thesis.
This strikes me as, and look, AI complicates things dramatically, and so folding space-time becomes trivial. Maybe what I'm about to say isn't true, but it seems self-evident to me that once you can attach the nervous system truly, like your own nervous system, and you can manipulate your neurochemistry, that you would create dream states.
Infinite worlds.
Yeah, that you just go inward. Why would you bother projecting out, which would take so much more energy?
That's right.
And so you just go in and you have these incredible experiences. That strikes me as
let's go
the
back
great
to your
filter.
question of purpose now. So, because I link it back to that. And I think purpose is so important for all of us to have. It's driven everything of significance done. But let's say that we end up in a world in which, and one of the implications of exponential organizations are that we have what a friend Harry Clore called technological socialism, where technology takes care of
Harry
you
well.
versus the state, right? And in that world where you're taken care of, what's your purpose? Maybe your purpose is to have fun. Maybe your purpose is to play. Maybe your purpose is to, and this we go back to the Matrix again, because without the challenge, the question is that empty, the old Twilight Zone, right? Where the guy goes to Las Vegas and he's winning all the time, and he thinks
I know of the Twilight Zone, but I haven't seen the episodes.
So in this episode, this guy dies and he's been a mafioso, and he goes to heaven or hell, and he shows up and there are beautiful women every place. He's in a Las Vegas casino and he's winning every night, and he's winning and he's winning and he's winning, and he's all the riches, anything he wants, 24/7, and it's like amazing, right? His dreams coming true. But like a month later, he's like, I am so tired of winning all the time. God, there's nothing challenging. There's no challenges at all. And he turns and he says, this heaven, man, it's terrible. He goes, what makes you think you're in heaven?
So good. I knew that was a punchline, and you still gave me the chills.
Yeah.
That is, that's a real thing, man.
Yeah.
And I do think about that, the sort of optimal, like what's that optimal level of friction? And there was a really fascinating time in my life in building impact theory where I needed to get good at Japanese style storytelling, so manga and anime. And I was reading manga like a fiend and watching as much anime as I could. I was getting up super early and working out and then watching like an hour and a half of anime. It was awesome. It's one of the most fun times I've had as an adult. The second I felt like I understood the art form, I couldn't let myself do it anymore. Like I couldn't enjoy it. I was just like, you already understand it. Now you're just doing it to like pass time doing something that's enjoyable. And it had that same feeling of like winning all the time where I'm like, this isn't interesting. It needed to be moving towards something. It needed to add up to something.
Humans like progress.
Yeah. This is the very reason that Lisa and I did not buy an island and retire and not engage. It's like, I knew I would end up sitting on that
I can tell you
beautiful
other
beach.
reasons not to buy an island, by the way.
I bet you can.
I mean, look, life is about growth, right? And even if we have plentiful, and today relatively we have plentiful, go back 1,000 years, we were all spending 28 hours a day in the fields just to put 3 meals on the table, right? We've steadily shrunk the amount of time. As we move towards probably some structure like a UBI, we then have an equal opportunity to do lots of interesting things. When we've studied abundance, say the Romans taking over and creating the Roman Empire, the Mughals taking over India and encountering abundance, society very clearly goes to 4 things that they do: food, art, music, and sex. Not in that order. And so that's essentially where you will end up. And you end up looking at self-expression and the artistic realm much more than you did before, whether in whatever realm you choose. And so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And by the way, we've done this for thousands of years, right? Buddhists sit in contemplation, they reach enlightenment, and their life is spent contemplating, and that's where they get the most joy. And this is something that I think we'll get to as a species.
I'd like to bring it back to the following. One of the reasons we wrote this book is to help entrepreneurs and businesses understand that they can make a much bigger dent in the universe than ever before. And while it's not about making money, it's about how do you build a significant company that is transforming the planet and is making the world a better place. And what we're finding is that there are a number of ways that companies do this reliably with the biggest dent, and so we want to get that information out there. And the reality is, if you're building a company today, you need to start with this as your playbook in order to succeed, because it's table stakes. And if you're running a large-scale company, if you don't use these attributes, if you're not using these, you are not going to survive the rest of this decade. You know, what I say is there are 2 kinds of companies by the end of this decade. You know, those that are fully utilizing AI and these exponential technologies, and those that are out of business. That's it. It's this decade where all of this is happening. And so, you know, we talk about the first step in building an EXO is having a massive transformative purpose. And it's going to be that passion-driven need to make a difference in the world that's going to carry you through. Doing anything big and bold in the world is hard, unless you're driven by awe on one side of the emotional curve or pain on the other side of the emotional curve. You're going to give up before you get there.
No doubt. Yeah. When I'm teaching entrepreneurs, I always tell them that success is a game of attrition. Most people give up, and you've got to stick it out long enough to figure this out. So that would be the old paradigm is that, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, in looking at what you're doing and what you've been building in impact theory, you do use a lot of the 10 attributes that follow an MTP, and it'll be fun to actually see which ones you're cranking on.
Yeah, no, MTP is definitely our lead engine. We know what we're doing and we know why we're doing it. And that's a big part of the way that we attract talent, which you guys have talked a lot about. Yeah. But tying it to this idea of Buddhism, so there obviously all of us get to make a choice every day effectively as to whether we recognize that all of suffering comes from attachment and desire, and thusly we go live a monastic life and we remove ourselves completely from that stream, or we say, I'm going to do deep engagement in a way that's thoughtful, in a way where I'm not sort of blindly chasing something. It's not want, it's not greed. but it is very much leveraging the human desire for progress. You talked about that earlier. To see how much I can do with my life. That's something that really drives me, is I just want to see. I feel like I was given sort of an average hand at cards. I want to see how well I can play it.
Yes.
Right.
And that's extremely intoxicating for me. It's just like, whoa.
But that's just as powerful, right? If you're let's say you're an enlightened monk, there's two ways of doing it. You can go and meditate forever, or you can go into the world and be of service. And that's as a richer path, much harder path, because you've got to do stuff and interact with the world, which is messy and ugly, and you put yourself at risk and you put yourself out there. But when you can make a major difference in a particular problem, like you're doing, many of our communities are making unbelievable changes and transformation in their societies, their companies, their governments, their countries. This is where the beauty of life comes out. And we think that over the next decade or so, every company, every nonprofit, every government department, every impact project will be structured along these lines of these attributes, because it's just better. And we now have the data to show it. I don't know if you came across the Fortune 100 data that we mentioned.
did.
I mean, unbelievable, right? Over
Could you summarize those?
Yeah, so when we wrote the original book, I did a segment on CNBC Squawk Box, and we ranked the Fortune 100 against the EXO model. So we gauged to what extent is Walmart purpose-driven or not, to what extent is IBM using lean startup thinking and experimentation, to what extent is GE decentralizing decision-making or not. And we came up with an index ranking these organizations by this model, essentially ranking the purpose-driven, scalable, flexible, adaptable quotient of each of these, and the bottom is the least flexible, least adaptable. Over 7 years, we tracked which 10 used those attributes the most and which used them the least. And then we compared the two. And 7 years is a pretty decent long amount of time to account for temporal blips in the stock market, etc. We found that the top 10 most EXO friendly compared to the bottom 10, revenue growth was 3 times higher, profitability was 6.4 times higher, return on equity was 11 times higher, but shareholder returns, compound annual growth rate, was 40 times higher. And literally, we had to scour the numbers like 4 times over, because it's just too big. How could this be? And so now it's pretty clear that as we enter a more volatile world, your ability to adapt is going to drive market value. And we can measure this now completely. Therefore, every organization going forward needs to be architected along this way to deal with the increasing volatility in the world. And the other side of that volatility and disruption is the unbelievable opportunity that's sitting out there. Right? And this is where I think the work that you're doing, Peter, is so important, because you're nonstop showing people the world is unbelievably abundantly full of opportunity. Freaking go get it. Go have some fun.
So walk me through why does adaptation return so much more to shareholders, and what does one have to do to be adaptive?
Okay. So let's take the car industry, right? You're chunking along making combustion engine cars, and you're incrementally improving those cars, 8 valves to 16 valves. Okay, you add turbo, you add anti-lock braking systems, et cetera, et cetera. Along comes Elon with the Tesla and goes totally different paradigm, right? Now you have 2 choices right there. You go, this is a joke, it's never going to work. Look at it, it's like the Kodak camera. The first version is clunky and it doesn't work so well, et cetera. And you keep trying to do things your old way. Over time, you're going to get wiped out, because you're not adapting to where the world actually is, right? There's so many hundreds of reasons why an electric car today is much better than a combustion engine car. Now, it's taken the car industry 10 years. I would argue that until the Taycan came out last year, that the
Taycan? What's
the
that?
Porsche Taycan,
Porsche.
the
Got it.
Porsche electric car. I would argue that the 2012 Tesla Model S was still the most advanced car in the world until the Taycan, right? So 10 years it took them to respond. Well, the market cap, you can see the result there, the unbelievable loss of capability, leading edge thinking, etc. And you have the same thing happening in drones and in aircraft and other things. All industries are geared towards the status quo and trying to make incremental, and this is where you devolve to. Meanwhile, you have breakthrough thinking, breakthrough opportunity, and the recent explosion in AI capability just adds a rocket booster to all of that. So now we're going to see new companies emerge that are creating unbelievable value in very, very little time. And if you're a legacy organization, you have to figure this out. And we've actually figured out a tool set for this. We find that we've come up with a 10-week engagement that we've run in big companies that hacks culture at scale. And we're able to solve what we call the immune system problem. So when you try anything disruptive in a big company, the antibodies attack you. Right? Finance, legal, HR, branding goes, you can't do that. The general answer in a big company, if you're trying to do anything crazy, is no. And we've learned how to switch that to a yes. And we've done it now.
Don't just gloss past it, because even so, a company of my size, which contractors, et cetera, is a little over 100 people.
Yeah.
And there are times where I want to headbutt my own teammates.
Yes.
Because
the heuristic we have is if you're over about 50 people, you have an immune system.
Yeah, I've had that at the XPRIZE. I've had that every place, right? Because you're a quick start, you want to try things. And one of the things that's critical that a lot of companies that are built as EXOs have, they begin with an experimental culture and a data-driven culture with dashboards, and the tyranny of confidence isn't given a place to grow.
The tyranny of confidence, what do you mean?
The tyranny of confidence is where I'm confident I know the right answer versus let's run the experiment and see what the right answer is, right? Because we've lived in this as humanity. You hire the expert, you hire the guy or gal who's been in a competitor, and you bring them in and you base what you're doing on their experience level. But that is so limited compared to the world we're living in today. And so how do you build a data-driven experimentalist organization? I add one other feature on top of that, which is a founder-led company. So you get companies like Tesla and SpaceX or Amazon, where you've got, where Jeff Bezos in his very famous shareholder letter of like 2008, whatever it was, says, I'm not going to optimize for profitability. I'm optimizing for growth. And if you don't like it, invest someplace else. Right? So how do you have that kind of, benevolent dictatorship? That's where you're then looking at the data to decide, not the way all your competitors are doing it.
If you want to scale your business, you absolutely have to have the right data in order to understand what's really going on. If you want to do that well, I highly recommend that you check out NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR, all of it into one platform for one source of truth. With NetSuite, you reduce IT costs, and you can cut the cost of having to maintain multiple systems. You improve efficiency by bringing all of your major business processes into one platform, slashing manual tasks and eliminating errors. It is no wonder over 37,000 companies have already made the move. See how you can cut costs and boost performance at the same time with NetSuite. By popular demand, NetSuite has extended its one-of-a-kind flexible financing program for a few more weeks. Head to netsuite.com/theory. netsuite.com/theory. Again, netsuite.com/theory.
Given the state of AI and quantum computing, do you think that we're on the brink of human immortality?
I think we're on the brink of a health span revolution. I think immortality comes when we can scan the brain and upload you into the cloud.
You think that's the only way? We have to transcend biology?
People have to realize we're constantly replenishing all of the cells of our body anyway, right? Like the oldest cells in your body are your fat cells that are an average of 8 years old. Given AI, given quantum technology, we're going to start to understand why we age, how to slow it, stop it, maybe reverse it. And I think those things will get us north of 100 years. The bowhead whale, the largest mammal, can live 200 years. The Greenland shark can live 500 years and have pups at 200 years old. And the question is, if they can live that long, why can't we? Mm-hmm. And for me, it's either a hardware problem or a software problem. And we're getting the tools to be able to deal with and edit our software, edit our hardware. And for people who are saying, well, am I going to be part of that? Am I going to live for hundreds of years? Am I going to have the chance to be immortal? I'm going to put aside the immortal part again. I think your mission should be, how do I live long enough, healthfully enough, to intercept the breakthroughs that are coming, right? So it's interesting. Someone asked me a question like, how long do you want to live, right? And I remember when I was in medical school, I set a 700-year lifespan, which is a ridiculous number. It's ridiculous because if I can live, I think another 30 years from now, the breakthroughs we're going to see are going to buy you the next 30 or 100 years. So your goal is to live long enough to intercept what's called longevity escape velocity.
Yeah, that to me feels very plausible when I think about the magic trick that is AI.
Yeah.
Walk me through what you think is the rough timeline. And I fully acknowledge that looking into the future when you're talking about something as revolutionary as AI becomes a little bit comical, but I think that it helps to map how you think about how this is going to work,
right.
Like what the problems are that we're going to solve. Where's the intersection of AI and quantum computing?
Yeah.
You're the only one I really hear talking about that and its importance in this revolution. What is it about quantum computing you think is going to help?
Yeah.
Are there qualities of AI that are only going to be possible with quantum computing? What are the next steps?
Let me define, first of all, lifespan and health span. So lifespan is how long you live, how long your heart is beating, how long your brain is processing. Health span is how long you've got the vital energy to enjoy life. You know, get up in the morning, play with your kids, your grandkids, go for a hike, enjoy yourself, have the mental, physical vitality, right? That's health span. And that's really what we want. You know, if someone says, I don't want to live to 120 years old, it's because they have a mental image of being in a wheelchair drooling, right? That's not what we're speaking about here. If I said to you at 120, your mind was as sharp as that ever was, you could, hit the ground and do 40 push-ups and, would you want to live to 120? And I think anybody who is loving life would say yes. So that's our goal. It's that level of vitality. So AI is going to play in this by helping us understand such a complicated situation. So why do some people live to 100 or 115 or 120 and smoke, and still get that far out, right? Why other people die at 50 or 60? And I think aging in human biology is so complicated that we're still deciphering it. We're still untangling this process. And there's so much data we can now get. And we've talked about, one of my companies, Fountain Life, is sort of like the most advanced diagnostics you can do. So when I go to Fountain Life, and we've got centers around the US, I will be digitally uploaded. So in the course of a day, I will have a full body MRI, an MRI of my brain vasculature, brain blood flow, a coronary CT, looking for soft plaque, DEXA scan, 120 blood biomarkers, metabolome, microbiome, your genetics, everything, right? So it's 150 gigabytes of data. And that data over the course of thousands of individuals can only be analyzed by AI. But then we can start to say, look, the people who were the healthiest and didn't have disease, or we can look at pre-symptomatic disease, and the people who developed this over time had this genetic sequence or had these blood biomarkers. It's the incorporation of massive data aggregation and AI that's going to help us understand why some people survive and thrive and others don't. And then what are the therapeutics? Look at everybody who took rapamycin or metformin or, was on, whatever drug combinations. It's so complicated, but we're running this massive experiment. And AI is going to help us to untangle that and get some insight and say, yes, for your genetics, for your age, for your objectives, these meds, these supplements are the best for you, right? That's one of the things I'm really working to build out for myself and our members at Fountain Life, is that kind of a correlation. Like what you want to do in life your upload, your genetics, number of pills you're willing to take per day, this is the right combination for you.
Yeah, I think N of 1 is going to be a big part of this. Okay, I'm going to lay out my thesis.
Okay.
Tell me where I go wrong.
Please.
So one, I want to say that I come at this the way that a sci-fi writer would come at it. So I understand enough of it to get the gist and to be able to prognosticate. The specifics will be filled in by people that really know the science. But the way I see this playing out is that, okay, we need... This is a game of pattern recognition. There is
Massive
a reason,
pattern recognition.
right? There is a reason why we age. So step one is going to be by, I think, by getting into synthetic data very, very quickly. So we'll upload whatever the first 10,000, 100,000 people that go through something like Fountain Life, and we begin to speak the language of DNA, let's say, and we'll probably need to feed into the AI, not just human DNA, but across all kinds of species, feed it as much DNA as we can. It goes in, it learns the language of DNA. It begins to feed itself data and begin to try to predict different outcomes based on, okay, this environment with this genetic code, this drug interaction, whatever. Again, looking for the massive amount of data, but trying to parse out the different patterns in it so that it can isolate what the problem is. Now, with my very sort of layman understanding of all of this, my again, just guess at this point is that what's really going on is the epigenome is where all this breaks down. You know David Sinclair's study as well as I do, which showed that even if you breed a mouse to just get massive amount of breaks in its DNA, over time, the DNA still looks the same. Like we are able to repair the DNA. It isn't what we used to think it was, which is you're getting these mutations in the DNA over time and the DNA is effectively getting corrupted. But something is happening. And so if that something is the epigenome where we're mistagging it, again, this is my layman's explanation of how this works, but they're going in and putting in the wrong bookmarks. For people that don't know how this works, your DNA is basically really tightly wound. And a little bit of it gets exposed to say, I'm an eye cell, I'm a skin cell, I'm a heart cell, whatever. And as you age, you're de-differentiating. And so your eye cell maybe now isn't purely an eye cell because parts of the DNA are unraveling. So it's a little bit of a skin cell, a little bit of a heart cell, a little bit of an eye cell. And so now this is where the function begins to degrade over time. If the AI can figure out, okay, cool, that really is the problem. This is exactly what's going on. Yeah. Here are the Yamanaka factors or whatever that you need to put to work to rewind the cell so that it resets. And so now we're getting the bookmarks in all the right places. That part, once that's figured out, again, my gut instinct is that's going to be handled through the AI using quantum computing to be able to crunch just an unbelievable amount of synthetic data. So we don't have, because if you have to feed in millions or billions of people, like I just worry that that's going to take way too long for somebody of my age. But if we can do this via synthetic data, then the odds that it goes faster go way up. Yeah. Where's the flaw in that thinking?
Listen, when I was in medical school, I don't know, 35 years ago, I went arguably to the best medical, university and engineering schools on the planet. And none of this was being talked about, right? All of this is really, this entire conversation is the last 5-6 years. And it's moving very fast. It was heresy before I talk about longevity or age reversal. And now it's one of the hottest subjects on the planet because it's the biggest marketplace. I mean, what would you not pay for an extra 20 or 30 health years of life? So yes, we are, to echo what you said, if you think about it, each of us get 3.2 billion nucleotides, our genome, 3.2 billion letters from our mom and from our dad. And you've got that same genome when you're born, when you're 20, when you're 50, when you're 100, maybe when you're 150. But why don't you look the same if you've got the exact same instruction set? Why don't you have a 12-pack, if that's a thing, or a 6-pack, whatever, when you're 80, like you had when you were 20?
That one I can answer, but the face, I think, is because the 6-pack has everything to do with your lifestyle. If you're putting on too much fat, it is what it is.
I mean, my point simply being is, why don't you have the physique or the ability to build muscle or everything of your youth when you're 100? Why is there a difference? And it isn't your genome. It isn't your 3.2 billion letter instruction set. It is what you just said a minute ago, your epigenome. Epi for the Greek word for above, and it's the control system. And you're right. When you're just born, or when you're 10, or when you're 20, when you're 80, different genes are on and different genes are off. And the epigenome is the control of which genes are on and which genes are off. At the highest level, it is the control of the genes for skin are on in your skin cells, and the gene for your hepatocytes are on in your liver. And so there are different cells. They've differentiated, silencing certain genes and saying, your genes aren't needed here in the skin cell. You don't need to be, purifying out urine, right? And so as you age, what apparently is going on is that the control of which genes are on and which genes are off are beginning to blur. And as you're getting older, the genes that should be off are turned on, or the genes that should be on are turned off. I'll give you an example. Skin. The supple skin of a child, of a newborn, right? Part of what's going on is we have something like 23 collagen genes, and we express multiple collagen molecules that make your skin, give it the texture and so forth. But as you grow older, we begin to silence some of those genes. And so the collagen molecules of the 23, maybe only 8 or 9 are expressed. And so you start to get, wrinkles, and, your skin starts to look that of an old person. But can you turn them back on? So one of the companies, my venture fund, Post-Capitalism, is an investor in his Marble Biome, and it's using genetic engineering, epigenetic reprogramming, to turn back on those genes, right? To give, to take back the look and feel of your skin 30 years. So can we do that across multiple parts of the body? Can we rejuvenate you in that regard? And that is definitely one of the hottest topics out there right now. Can we turn back the clock? And in December 2020, David Sinclair wrote a very famous paper in which he demonstrated turning back the clock in the retinal visual systems of mice, basically reprogramming the epigenome to go back to where it was earlier and giving mice that had lost their vision renewed vision. And one of his companies, Life Biosciences, is now doing that in primates, right? And once
Have they already done it?
They're doing it in primates right now.
And have they shown that it has the same retinal impact? Or
I believe they have.
Whoa.
We're then a fraction of a step away from humans, right? So this is the hot conversation of epigenetic reprogramming on one element, AI on the other. And I really fundamentally believe that we're within striking distance to making a dent in human aging. And I mean, that's why you and I are here in this moment. We just announced our $101 million health span XPRIZE, challenging teams around the world. It's the largest prize ever in human history. Challenging teams to restore function in muscle, immune, and cognition. Hopefully this is a age reversal therapeutic that teams will deliver. We're just looking at 3 systems. If the teams going after this health span XPRIZE are doing something that at the root cause is hitting aging, then they're likely to hit aging throughout the body. We're only going to measure immune, muscle, and cognition because those are easy to measure. And for me, as I get older, I want to have the immunity to fight infectious disease and cancer. I want to have, the muscular vitality to, hike and play with my great-grandchildren, right? And the cognition to be sharp for decades to come.
Okay, so one of the things that I care deeply about is the timing of all of this.
Yeah, me too,
so
buddy.
with the prize, they have 7 years, right?
So we announced this now in what month did we hit? November, December of 23, and it's a 7-year time frame.
Why 7 years? Do you think that's?
I think I set 7 years originally because if an XPRIZE, the original XPRIZE, the first one I launched back in 1996 was a $10 million prize for spaceflight. And again, these XPRIZes are not for a paper study. They're not for an idea. A team has to actually demonstrate the thing, and then they get the money. And they keep their IP. The world gets the benefit. And the first XPRIZE took 8 years. It was launched in 1996. It was won in 2004 when Burt Rutan, backed by Paul Allen, built Spaceship One that Richard Branson then bought the rights to and created Virgin Galactic. And since then, our prizes have typically taken anywhere from 2 to 8 years. We had one prize, a $30 million race to the moon that Google funded. It was at a 10-year horizon. It did not get won. It got shut down, though 2 of the teams actually made it to the moon shortly thereafter, but crashed on landing.
Interesting.
But they still, got to lunar orbit and still made there, which is a big, big deal. A Japanese team and an Israeli team. So by setting a deadline on a prize, you force teams to actually do something versus sit back. If it's there forever, they'll take, the race element does help them accelerate, but a deadline, when you're facing a deadline, you're gonna take even more aggressive action. So 7 years for me felt the right length. The second thing is one of our largest donor in this prize is a group called Revolution, which is it's a global nonprofit based out of Riyadh and out of the US. And Saudi Arabia has a 2030 vision of really, they have a lot of projects culminating in the year 2030. And it just so happened that is the culmination of this prize as well. So 2030 works from that perspective as well.
When I think about AI and the rate of advancement, so I come at things from an entertainment perspective. And when I look at what's happened in the last 11 months, quite frankly, it hasn't even been a full year that I've been paying attention to text to video, the leaps are pure insanity.
It is. It's insane. I was just looking at Emad's latest stability AI, which is fast as you're typing.
Yeah.
There's an ape with an orange on its head hanging from bouncing on a trampoline. And as soon as you add words, the images are changing. It's insane.
It's crazy.
We're a micro step away from Hollywood movies being produced by describing them in words.
Yeah, given the rate of change in the last 11 months, I'm going to guess in the next 5 years, you will see commercials and things done entirely just text to video. I think
it's the next 2 years, 5 years.
It certainly could be in the next 3. Just given the amount of UI changes they'll have to do, my gut instinct is that you're looking at least 3 years. But so when I think about the advancements in longevity, when I look at what humans have been able to do just in the last 10 years, it's already incredible. When you slap AI onto that, then it gets nuts. What do you think is going to be the contribution of quantum computers? How real is that right now?
Yeah, so we're in the early days of quantum computing, to be clear, right? Quantum computing is a complicated subject, which I'm not going to do service to be very clear, right? So classical computing is basically computing that uses ones and zeros on an integrated circuit and a typical binary language. Quantum computing uses qubits that are basically can be anything, a 0 or 1 or anything between a 0 and a 1. And what we find is it really represents the real world. We're living in a quantum world. We're not living in a binary digital world. We model the world using very advanced binary systems. We model on a molecular level. So, for example, DeepMind, which is part of Alphabet now, right, which created a program called AlphaFold. And AlphaFold, I remember when I was in medical school, or when I was an undergrad at MIT at the time, the big grand challenge of the time is, could you predict how a protein would fold? So a protein is the basic building structure of the body. It's a structural material. It's an enzyme. It's muscle tissue. It is a sequence of amino acids. There are 23 essential amino acids here. These amino acids, when they're assembled in a ribosome, read from DNA to RNA to a protein, the sequence of amino acids that are like Lego blocks strung together begin to fold into a very predictable 3D structure. And that 3D structure is everything. That 3D structure determines what that protein does, how it functions, how it interacts in a antibody. And it was always considered, if you could go from an amino acid sequence, like I can tell you the sequence of the amino acids in this 1,000 amino acid sequence, and if you could tell me how it would fold, that would be the most incredibly powerful predictive engine on the planet. And it was a supercomputing problem. And it was a couple years ago now that AlphaFold, an algorithm out of DeepMind, cracked that problem. It was able to go from an amino acid sequence to predicting a protein within a single atomic diameter accuracy.
Whoa.
And then it went on to predict every protein and how it folds in the human body. And then Meta created their own version of that and was able to predict every protein in the biological ecosystem. It's gone insanely fast, right? So now we can start to design proteins versus just find out what nature. If we want a protein that has a certain shape that interacts with a certain key and lock on the surface of a cell. But that's all being done in binary. That's all being done with AI algorithms operating on GPUs. At a atomic and molecular level, we are quantum systems. And the belief is that quantum computers will be able to enable us to model what's going on at a much higher level of fidelity, much faster. And so that we can start to understand the fundamental elements of how life itself works in a much deeper way and start to model things. I don't know what factor to use, trillions of times faster than a classical computer, because it takes a lot of energy and a lot of time to model things. But quantum is going to be able to model chemistry and model biology at lightning speeds. So I believe we're going to see, 2023, 2024, we're seeing the inflection point of AI.
What does that mean?
It means we're seeing AI growing at unbelievable speeds. What you said a few minutes ago, that it's awesome. It's unbelievable how fast it's moving. And typically an inflection point is it's a slow, AI. So AI began, the first conversations in AI were in 1956 at Dartmouth University. A group of a dozen people came together to talk about this idea of, can we model intelligence in
They spent
artificial
a summer trying to do it, right?
They to try and get the theories and think through it, right? And then neural networks were proposed not very long after that. But we didn't have the computational power until this past decade to actually start to put these algorithms into play. And so while AI is 56, 60, 70 years old, it's only now that we're seeing this massive inflection. It's the knee of the curve. It's the point where its speed is so fast, right? And now we're going to start to see AI programming AI, and it becomes self-referential and accelerates even faster. So quantum is still slow. Meaning we're getting systems, we're beginning to learn how to utilize it. There's like 2 or 3 public quantum compute companies. A friend, I don't know if you know Jack Hittery. No. Jack is on my board of trustees at XPRIZE. He spun out of Google a company called Sandbox AQ.
Yes.
Right? Eric Schmidt's the chairman, and Jack is the CEO. And A stands for AI and Q stands for quantum. And it's a company that's really bringing together AI and quantum computing. And his belief is it's going to be most impactful in a few key areas, and biology and chemistry is one of those key areas.
That to me is really fascinating. The fact that we're going to be able to manipulate the building blocks of biology is pretty crazy. Where do you think that our ability to predict the folding of proteins goes? How do we use that? What comes of it?
So now the question becomes, what drug do you want in order to handle a certain situation? So we're going, drug discovery up until now has been, you go in the Amazon forest and you forage for different leaves and stuff, and you take it back to the lab and you see what you got, right? Like rapamycin, which is one of the longevity medications out there. I'm not going into detail about it, but it was discovered in a soil sample from Easter Island, which is known as Rapa Nui. And that rapamycin got its name from that. So this random process of like just finding stuff and trying to purify it and see if it has an effect on anything is going to go, we're going to flip the model to saying, okay, what exactly do we want to interact with this receptor on this cell or block this chemical process inside of the mitochondria, and we're going to design it. And then we'll see, does it interact with anything else? We're going to start to create in silico models, right? Computer models of cells in high fidelity to understand what's going on and how you want to tweak it.
Do we already have the ability to manufacture this stuff? Or
yeah, absolutely, 100%. And there's a company called In Silico Medicine. Alex Zeverankov, who's the CEO there, is a friend. My venture fund's an investor, full disclosure. And they have, in silico medicine is, as the name says, we're going to create medicines in simulation on computers and then manufacture it and then show that it works. And they have drugs in phase 2 or phase 3 right now that we're designing a computer for a particular medical condition and it's working out.
How does drug discovery work exactly using AI?
You're going to understand a molecular process inside a cell that is causing a disease. And you're going to say this particular molecule is a waste product that's accumulating that is causing this disease. And can we create a protein that might go bind that molecule in a highly accurate fashion that when it's bound blocks the disease from occurring and allows your immune system to clear it, right? So we're going to start to tinker with, and the question then becomes is, does that molecule you've designed to block a particular reaction or a waste product, does it have a secondary negative effect that you don't want, right? So you're still going to go through clinical trials to determine that there's no downside of that.
Will that be more of a, we have to do it, but in reality, we've already run the simulation 6 ways to Sunday inside the computer?
There will be a point in the future. So for example, when SpaceX launched the Dragon capsule to the space station for the first time, it worked. It worked perfectly. They're great engineers, but the reason it worked fantastic is they had a highly accurate computer model of the entire system. And so they modeled it in high fidelity, and it performed like the model said. And so, for example, more recently, we see Starship making serial advances as it's going towards orbit. Of course, the Crisis News Network and all the media say, "Oh, Starship fails." It's like bullshit. It was an amazing incremental success. The first ship got to a certain point. The second ship got further. The third one will probably work perfectly because those ships are highly instrumented, and all the data is coming back, and the data is being used to advance the models and saying, "Aha, this is actually what was going on, and so let's change this engine or this structural entity." And we're going to start to do the same thing in biology, which we're going to start to gather enough data and instrument and understand what's going on, where we can eventually get to a point where we have a highly accurate model of the human cell. And not just a cell, but maybe it's an organ, maybe it's a 1,000 cells or 1 billion cells. And we're going to know that this particular designed protein or medicine, whatever it might be, works perfectly. And we'll get to a point where you don't need to go through a massive clinical trial. How far is that away? It's probably not the next 5 or 10 years, but it is probably 20 to 30 years out. But the cost of these, right? And then, by the way, this drug works for me, not for you. By the way, do you know, I don't know the exact number, but it's pathetic. When a drug is approved by the FDA and you're prescribed that drug, what percentage of time the drug actually works for you?
I've heard this before. It's either 40% of the time it works or 60% of the time it works.
No, it's like under 20%.
No way.
Yeah, it's and I want to check that number so I have it, but it's when a drug goes through the drug discovery process, the first goal is do no harm.
Yes.
And by the way, most of the drug discovery process for the last century has been done or safety trials have been done in men only.
Yep. There's a good reason for that, though.
Well, the reason was that drug companies didn't want to deal with menses and menopause
Correct.
and so forth, right? It was inconvenient.
There's just so many more complications.
But
to
what
the female
happened was when
hormonal
drugs
cycle.
were taken off the market because they failed, it was because they hadn't tested them in women. Because why assume that this drug that we developed for a particular condition that was safe in men is also safe in women? Anyway, so first is do no harm, and then does it work? And when the FDA approves a drug, it worked in enough people that it was worth approving. But it doesn't work in 100% of the current circumstances, and it's a minority number, and I'll have to check on that.
I have an obsession as an entrepreneur, which is as a human, but this really manifests as an entrepreneur. People need to stop trusting themselves so much.
Yes.
People are so convinced
That they're
they
right.
know that they don't even recognize that they have a worldview. And if they do recognize that they have a worldview, they are utterly convinced that it is simply a reflection of what is objectively true.
Yeah.
And so they're like, no, the way that I see things is the right way. And I'm like, oh my God. Like,
Is that your view?
yeah, exactly.
Confirmation bias,
That's my view,
right?
and it's right, Peter.
One of the big things that AI is going to give us as a gift is the ability to overcome all of these biases we have, right? All these cognitive biases, recency bias, negativity bias, confirmation bias, recency
Sunk cost bias.
all of these things, which our brain really sucks at processing. And so we have all these hacks, right? You trust someone who looks like you. You give higher weight to the most recent information you got. You give higher weight to negative information over positive information. And, there's going to be a version where you go to Jarvis, your AI, and you say, I want to put cognitive bias alert on. Tell me if I'm being biased.
When we were building Singularity University, I was the founding executive director there. A few years in, I'd written the book, and I was off, and Peter asked me to come to a board meeting and say, what should SU look like in 5 years or 10 years? And I made a comment. I said, you should shut it down, because you build an organization, and over time you spend more time trying to sustain the organization than trying to solve the problem that you set out to solve in the first place. And DARPA is the big organization. They do this. Every role, even the CEO, is 3 years long. And then you have to rotate out. You're not allowed to hold any role for more than 3 years. And you're measured.
They're worried about things getting stale?
Stale, and therefore they keep things fresh. And your legacy is, what did you do three-year patterns ago, and was it good or not? So now you're always focused on the long term. You take out all the politics, etc. And I think in today's world, if I had to kind of boil it down, I would say you build a company, and after 3 to 5 years, you just go, we're going to shut it down and force us to reinvent ourselves.
Or reinvent the company, right?
Reinvent it.
When the XPRIZE got won and we had Spaceship One fly, we held a meeting and said, do we shut it down, or do we reinvent ourselves into a platform?
Yeah.
And we did. And now we're getting ready to launch XPRIZE 3.0, which happened during COVID. I said, pulled the board together and said, this is a perfect opportunity for us to reinvent ourselves. And so I need to brief you on it, but we've reinvented XPRIZE, and I'm excited about that. And so you need to be constantly disrupting yourself. And it's tough because we're lazy in some ways.
Yeah, you tell a story in the book about Elon walking in, seeing him all long-faced and saying, what's wrong? Walk me through that moment.
So I was amazed. So I've known Elon for 23 years now. And when Falcon 1, which was their first vehicle, failed on the first time, the second time, the third time, and it succeeded on the fourth time, they miraculously, and timing is everything, got a contract for the Falcon 9, which was a $1 billion contract. And had they not won that, they may not be here today, but they did. And Elon made an incredible decision that took guts. He shut down the rocket line that just began flying. And there were very few successful operations. He said, focus on Falcon 9. Falcon 9 is our future. And so that went on for some number of years. And I was coming into SpaceX and Hawthorne to have lunch with him. And he was kind of, like you said, long-faced. And I'm like, what's up? And he goes, I just figured out, Falcon 9 had been up and operating and doing damn well. It's the most successful launch vehicle on the planet by a huge margin, right? It's like no countries compete with him. He's like the number one spacefaring power. And I said, what's wrong? He goes, well, I just figured out the Falcon 9 is not going to get us where we need to go, meaning to Mars, right? He's driven by this MTP, this massive transformative purpose, making humanity multiplanetary, getting humanity to Mars. And I need to start afresh. And so that has become Starship. And then he goes on to make a comment that when Starship begins successfully operating, he's going to shut down the Falcon 9 line. Wow. Which again is like, it's like, I don't know what the analogy is, but it's like you're the most successful at the top of the heap and you're about to shut down that entire revenue flow. Now, whether or not he does or does not, that was the statement he made. But it's that mindset of focus, of absolute focus. I'm going to do whatever it takes.
Dedication to the big goal. Yeah.
Okay, so as somebody who knows this intimately from the inside of the need to disrupt yourself or somebody else is going to do it, the willingness to look at something and go, okay, we're going to have to start this all over. How do you get your organization on board with that? Because the normal human is going to rebel against that massively.
You don't. So the only model we found that works at all is to go to the edge of your organization and build a new capability, aiming into an adjacent area or a totally separate area, right? So I remember at one of the events at Singularity, Larry Page came to me and said, hey, I was the head of innovation at Yahoo before building out Singularity. And he came to me and said, hey, your unit at Yahoo is successful. Should I do an incubator model at Google? And I said, no, you'll have this immune system response. The more disruptive an idea we came up with in this incubator, the less Yahoo could handle it. And you're like, my job description is not workable, right? And so there was part of the result and lots of other inputs was Google X, which is separate going into it. They use hardware to go into adjacent spaces, Google Car, Google X, contact lenses, etc. The master of this model of going to the edge and doing something different is actually Apple. And yes, they have a great design capability and a technology supply chain. I argue that Apple's real innovation is organizational, because what they do, unlike anybody else, is they will form a small team that's really disruptive, put the team at the edge of the company, keep them secret and stealth, and they'll say to them, go disrupt another industry, whether it's watches or retail or payments or glasses or whatever now. So they have a portfolio of teams looking at different industries at the edge in secret. And when they see something, they go into it, and that becomes the new gravity center. Right? And there's hundreds of examples of this. Nestle for years tried to run Nespresso as a line of business, and it just failed. Finally, they set up as a separate entity on its own. Boom! Every hotel room in the world has an espresso machine, and so that's the only model that we've ever seen.
There is one more, which is the
platform
dictator. It is the larger than life leader who says, "This is what we're doing. If you don't agree with me, leave."
Yeah.
Do we have a good example of
Well,
that one?
Elon and Bezos
Steve
as
Jobs.
well, Steve Jobs for sure. It's like, it's the founder leader. It's very hard to do it in an older legacy company that's, hired a CEO. But it's people, when you have a strong enough MTP and the visionary has a strong enough MTP and they come to work for you, when they come to work for this vision, then they will have faith in you to make those right turns.
All right, going back to mindset, how does somebody cultivate that in themselves? Like if you want to become that guy or gal, like what do you do? What is it that an Elon has or a Steve Jobs has that other people can replicate?
So we close out the book with mindset, and it's the area I'm spending most of my time. And I'll phrase it like this for everybody listening. If you look at the most extraordinary leaders on the planet, Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, I don't care who's on your list, and you asked what made them successful. Was it the cash they had, the friends they had, the technology they had, or was it their mindset? Right? I think almost everybody would say it was their mindset. Your mindset is how you deal with challenges and opportunities. It's your reaction. It's how your neural net is wired. So the question is, if your mindset, if you agree that mindset's the most important thing a leader can have, an entrepreneur can have, what mindset do you have, first and foremost? Where did you get it? And then ask yourself the question, what mindset do you need for the world ahead? And so I posit there's a few key mindsets, and these are what I teach in my abundance community. First off, a curiosity mindset is fundamental. I know you believe this through and through.
Aggressively. Can you go into a little detail on that? Like when you say curious, what do you mean?
So curious is a willingness to actually dig and ask and have conversations. In the ChatGPT world, it's everything, right? So it's like, how do I use ChatGPT? Open it up and ask it. How do you, and then ask the next question, the next question, the next question. So when you have a kid who is asking you questions, it's go to your 8, 9, 10-year-old self in that and just be openly curious and asking as many questions as you can and going down the rabbit hole.
Steve Wozniak calls it tinkering, right? We're in the organization. Can you just tinker and play?
What stops people from tinkering or being curious?
Time constraint.
Quarterly targets.
Yeah, doing stuff that they were told is important, not having the time, and I think falling into ruts. So a curiosity mindset, especially if you're an entrepreneur, is like one of the most important things that you can incubate and have. The second mindset for me is an abundance mindset. And the abundance mindset is there is nothing truly scarce. We can talk about this also as first principle thinking, and this is one where Elon and I have had lots of conversations about abundance and that there is nothing truly scarce, right? That your ability as an entrepreneur to take something that was scarce and make it abundant is what entrepreneurs do great. So, the perfect example is energy, right? We used to kill whales on the ocean to get whale oil to light our nights. Then we ravaged mountainsides for coal. Then we drilled kilometers under the ocean, right? And then we fracked natural gas. But we live on a planet that's bathed in 8,000 times more energy from the sun than we consume as a species. And here's the key point. The energy is there, just not in a useful form yet. So technology takes whatever was scarce and makes it usable.
And abundant.
So water is another example. We live on a water planet, for God's sakes, right? 2/3 water. Yeah, but 97.5% is salt, 2% is ice. We fight over 0.5%. But there are technologies transforming scarcity into abundance. And first principle thinking, I wrote about this in Futures Faster Than You Think. When Elon decided to make Tesla, he basically looked at what was the spot price of lithium and nickel, and could you get the cost of batteries down from first principle thinking? And the answer is yes, we can get it there, and therefore the cars don't have to be that expensive. And that led him to go forward. Long story there. So that's abundance thinking, that instead of, if you have a pie, my favorite example, if you have a pie and friends are coming over for dinner, instead of slicing the pie into thinner and thinner slices, which is a scarcity mindset, you bake more pies, which is an abundance mindset. So we're living in a world where you can bake more pies. Everything can be abundant. And I mean, my whole mission on extending the healthy lifespan is about making time more abundant for people.
Probably going to take pies out of that equation.
Yeah, if you're gonna live longer, unfortunately.
I don't.
With pie.
Okay. Anyway, so an exponential mindset, a moonshot mindset, a purpose-driven mindset, and a gratitude mindset. Other mindsets I speak to, and we could talk forever about those. But there are mindsets that are important for us in this day and age.
Yeah, I want to go back to curiosity. So when I think about what derails my team, I love them to death, but one thing that I've encountered over and over is when people's ego gets tied up in being right, and they're not just obsessed with finding the right answer. It's because I think they have not yet accurately identified the way the world works, which is that if you are obsessed with being right, you will be wrong most of the time. If you're obsessed with identifying the right answer, then you can actually make progress. And so, I mean, this was certainly the trap that I fell prey to in my early 20s. That is like a demarcation line in the sand. My life before I realized that if I built my ego around being willing to stare nakedly at my inadequacies and figure out what the right answer is, instead of trying to position myself to look smart, that I could actually move forward. And
I love that.
That switches everything, because there's not only no emotional friction to admitting that you're wrong, there's like a little twinge of excitement of like, ooh, I've gotten this far being wrong, and now somebody's going to remove the scales from my eyes. Now I really can make this forward momentum. But man, I really for all the time that I spend on camera telling people how to think in this way, I find it very hard to get somebody who isn't ready for that to like hear it, make that switch, and change. If you guys have the magic words, I'd love to hear them.
So actually, this is music to our ears in a sense, because organizationally, individuals are pretty good. We have a lot of tool sets for transforming individual thinking, Tony Robbins, NLP, psychedelics nowadays, etc., to change your own mindset. But the groupthink that comes inside an organization is really hard to change. And what we found in EXOs, the characteristics that add up to an exponential organization, by default, have it be embracing of this mindset. So one of the ways we talk about what we've done, in the same way that a Tony Robbins, you go in there and you completely change your subconscious state from A to B, right? From a scarcity to an abundance mindset, whatever. We're able to do that at the organization level. We can take an organization that is old thinking, stuck in particular markets, et cetera, and you open it up using a combination of these characteristics, the mindset, the MTP, et cetera. So
we've learned how you introduce the ideas, but how do you get them to actually
Let me give you the hack. I learned this from Astro Teller. I had him on stage at A360 a few times, and he shared with something that I love. You're in the midst of developing a product. Everybody's absolutely sure of what's going on and how you're going to launch it, how it's going to work. And you hand out a piece of paper to everybody and you say, listen, guys, it's 6 months from now and the product has just failed and you know why it's failed. Write it down. You know exactly why it's failed. Write it down right now. And you are incentivizing someone to actually flip their situation and look at the flaws and elevate those. And then you go around the room and review why people say it's going to fail. And if you got 2 or 3 people saying the same thing, you know, it's maybe you got to look at
test that one first. Yeah. The other one we've come across that's a great hack is Amazon. They created something called the institutional yes. Have you ever heard of this?
No.
So they realized in any big company, it's really easy to say no. One of 20 people can say no, it'll kill the idea. Whereas if you're in a startup and you go to one investor and they say yes, you're off to the races. So how do you deal with that impedance mismatch? So they came up with a policy so that if you're inside Amazon, you come to me with an idea and I'm your boss, I'm not allowed to say no. my default answer must be yes. If I want to say no, I have to write a 2-page thesis as to why it's a bad idea and post
this
it
is
publicly.
brilliant.
Right? So they've created friction and embarrassment to saying no. It's much easier for me to go, go ahead, you'll fail at the next level anyway. And actually, one of the outcomes of this policy was Amazon Web Services. Nothing to do with their strategy, not on the roadmap, but nobody could figure out how to say no to it. And now it's one of the most successful products of all time, delivering, I think, 75% of their global profits.
Wow.
Because nobody could figure out how to say no to it, right? So we found a collection of little hacks and cultural transformations in companies that allow you to basically operate in this new modality, being very curious, purpose-driven, constantly testing assumptions, using small, agile teams operating at the edges as autonomously as possible, and then getting the business of the organization done.
Wow, I love that so much. I've taken a lot from Bezos over the years. Like, he's got some really amazing ideas. I do have to chuckle a little bit that this business genius still got taken down by dick pics, but just the human mind is absolutely hilarious.
We are all frail.
But yeah, nonetheless, look, I don't even throw shade at the guy. I get it. Live your best life.
Yeah.
But that's really brilliant. And I will implement that immediately.
Yeah.
We've had the luxury of watching hundreds of big companies deal in different ways, right? And it used to be that big companies were terrible at this. And then about 5 or 7 years ago, they started getting better. So instead of a Google or Yahoo or somebody saying, we're just going to compete with that little startup, they would just buy them. Zuckerberg saw that he was going to get disrupted by Instagram and WhatsApp, et cetera, bought them instead. And in general, you should leave them alone. Over time, the corporation can't handle it, gets its grubby fingers messed, and then they tend to typically kill it. But we're starting to learn now. If you look at, say, Google with LLMs, they were actually too scared to release them. And Amazon just went, let's just go for it. And boom. And
OpenAI.
sorry, Microsoft.
I was like, wait, Amazon?
Sorry. Microsoft just went,
What about
let's just
Bard?
go
What do you
for it."
guys think about Bard? How's it doing?
Very impressive.
I haven't touched it.
We've
at
been playing
all.
with it. It's very impressive.
Yeah.
It's early days yet. But
I'm finding fun doing stuff on OpenAI and at Bard at the same time and comparing them. And there are a few places where OpenAI failed and Bard succeeded and vice versa. So they're both useful. And what I'd like to mention, if I could, just because I want to go back to the thesis on the book. Again, our mission is to give people who are running large scale companies who want to survive the next 10 years a series of, this is what you should do if you want to reorganize your company. And if you're a startup, this is what you should do to be able to thrive in this decade. Because the world has changed. I mean, fundamentally, how you start a company today and how you succeed today is very different than 30 years ago.
It's very different than 6 months ago.
Well, yeah, true.
It's
That's
that
the part
crazy.
that scares
So-
me.
so
For
we ended
real,
up-
like, we've really just lived through the most disruptive 6 months. Nothing has ever more instantaneously impacted my business model, the way that I approach my employees, ever than the release of AI.
COVID.
Yeah. No.
I mean,
no, honestly, that did not impact my business nearly. It did, like, the day to day as you're not seeing people, but the fundamental way that we ran our business.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do it.
No,
I mean,
do it
we're in a
joking.
world right now where every doctor in the world is freaked out if they see this, and every lawyer in the world is freaked out.
Yeah,
Every teacher in the world is
I
freaked
love
out.
the fact that,
Every artist.
that OpenAI, ChatGPT passed the U.S. medical licensing exam 2 months after it was launched, right?
And the bar
That's
exam.
crazy.
Yeah.
It passed the Turing test. That was the one I didn't see coming, the signing of the, hey, let's slow down letter. And so I had Yoshua Bengio on the show. He's considered the godfather of AI. And I said, hey, your name was on that. What made you sign it? And he said, in no uncertain terms, I did not expect it to pass the Turing test as fast as it did. That set off every alarm bell that I have and, like, pumped the brakes.
This is the thing that we find most interesting, because we've known Emad and all these guys for a while. They are blown away by the success of these models.
yeah.
Right? So that's really fascinating that
Yeah.
that the folks themselves are just blown away. They have
And
no
it's
idea.
still early days,
Yeah, this is-
ladies and gentlemen. It's still early days. We're going to see so much more coming, and the recursive nature of self-improving capabilities. I showed this work done where a group of physicians were shown these case studies to diagnose a patient, and it was like they took 55 minutes and got 60% right. and the AI took like 12 minutes and got 85% right.
Whoa.
And the physicians aren't going to change next year, but the AI will get much better, and it'll
Bro.
be, seconds and 100% right.
Bro.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is where this gets really interesting. So I know you have another company, Fountain Life.
Yeah.
You guys are using AI. Are you open to talking about this?
Yeah, sure.
So longevity, I couldn't be more obsessed with the idea. And so as you were talking about it, my first question is, how are you guys going to start getting the patterns down? Because to me, this is the big thing. You talk to somebody like Peter Attia, and he's like, look, it is just next to impossible to do really good studies on diet and nutrition, what works, what doesn't work. There's just too many confounding variables. And I was like, AI is going to answer that. Like it can pull a pattern. Anything that can be reduced to a pattern, they can figure it out. Yeah. Regardless of like amount of variables, if there is a pattern to be had, it will suss it out. And given that we have some people that live to 120 and some that don't, there is a pattern.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll put it this way. There's a lot of interesting things. Not only are there some people who live to 120 and some people who make it to just 65, there are large species on this planet, like the bowhead whale that lives to 200 years, or the Greenland shark that lives to 500 years. And my question is, if they can live that long, why can't we? And I said, it's either a hardware problem or a software problem. All right. And we're going to understand that. This decade is the decade we're going to understand that. It's going to be AI and quantum technologies that give us that insight. So Fountain Life is just fountainlife.com. We have these 10,000 square foot facilities. We have 4 of them right now. We have a waiting list of like 50 that we'll build out globally. And you come and we digitize you. It's a full body, 150 gigabyte upload of you. Full body MRI, brain vasculature, brain function, a coronary CT, all of this with AI overlay, 80 blood biomarkers, genomics, metabolomics, your gut. And then we do this year on year. This is not a one and done, right? So in the first time you do it, we're going to see, is there anything going on that you should worry about? Most of us are optimists about our health, and we don't actually know what's going on inside our body.
Yeah, fuck.
And by the way, the body's really amazing at hiding disease.
Yeah, I'm going to put myself in that category.
It's like you think you're fine, but 70% of all heart attacks have no precedent.
Dude, that one freaks me out. That the first symptom of heart disease in most men is death.
Yeah, crazy, right? And 70% of cancers that kill you are not screened for. So it's this shit that drives me nuts. And so it's like an idiot not to be looking inside your body. And we used to not look because, well, if I find out, can I do anything? The answer is yes, you can. So you want to know. And so we screen people first, and then every year upload you every year. And it's looking for the patterns and what medicines. And we have a large corpus of data. And the AI ability to analyze that, to say with your genome, with your microbiome, with these meds, with this, there's going to be huge learnings out of this, right? And so I'm trying to build Fountain Life into an exponential organization. So I'm building around this book that we built. And every company I'm involved with is like, we need to use these 10 attributes in the book. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to have the impact globally that we want.
What are you going to tell the AI to look for?
So right now, it's you don't have to tell it to look for anything. You have to ask it to find any kind of anomalous patterns. You're looking for it's data over time. So you're looking for changes.
Tell me what's changed.
Tell me what's changing. And tell me, so I'll give you one of the examples. We're building, this is a fun part about Fountain Life, we're building a brand new health insurance company on top of it. So if you get Fountain Life insurance, which is available today, your employees, insurance is a perverse business. Fire insurance pays you after your house burns down. Life insurance pays your next of kin after they're dead. Health insurance pays you after you're sick. What we've done instead is when you sign up, your employees go through a set of pre-testing for us to discover any kind of disease and prevent it from a big payout later down the stream, right? So it's keeping your employees healthy. And what we want to do,
Wait. How does that model work though? So is the employee paying roughly what they would pay
they're playing
now?
exactly the same or less. The numbers are the same.
And the insurance company is actually saying we're going to do preventative.
We're doing preventative
scanning.
testing. Yes, preventative testing. And so here's what we're doing. One of the interesting things is there's a number of expensive tests we can do and a number of cheap tests we can do. And one of the things we're doing with AI is correlating which of these lower end tests correlate highly to the expensive tests. So you'll do the lower end cost test to find a signal in the noise, and then you'll verify with the expensive test.
Did you see recently both DeepMind and OpenAI released weather prediction models that were accurate 11 days out?
Whoa.
So this is fascinating. And I saw this morning a prediction model on Bitcoin. So
Tell me more, Peter.
yeah, well, it was trending up through the end of the year. Not a huge amount, but it was trending up. I'm a Bitcoin believer.
You
but
and me
anyway,
both.
Anyway, the point being interesting, right? Can AI make accurate predictions in seemingly massively complex systems like weather? I mean, I can't think of anything more complex than weather, or the financial markets. I mean, now it becomes fascinating if you're actually able to predict. And then the question becomes, well, if you can predict that, and I know, does that change my behavior
Yes.
when that changes?
In weather, no. In financial markets, yes.
Yeah. I mean, this goes back to, I'll ask you the question. My thesis is we're living in a simulation, and it's an nth generation simulation. We're living within a simulation, within a simulation, within a simulation, because I think we're going to have the technology to be able to do that. And we will because we can. And if that's in fact the case, I would do nothing different than I'm doing right now. We're in a game. How do you feel about that?
It's interesting. So I'm actually wearing the shirt right now. So I'm wearing a shirt for the video game that I'm building called Project Kaizen, which takes that as its hypothesis, which is everything you've ever known is a simulation. You have no body anywhere. There is no biological you. This is a simulation. And then once you know it's a simulation, then you can begin to manipulate it effectively. And that is me, again, as a sci-fi writer, trying to explore what it will mean to understand the rules by which all of this apparent complexity is born out of. Yeah. So for a long time, and look, honestly, it's only been in the last month or two that I've started thinking, maybe this really is a simulation. Just because the more I do thought exercises, probing at the edges of what would it mean for this to be built on a set of rules, and why would it be built on a set of rules, and what built it on a set of rules, you just start asking things back recursively. And look, I map to what I understand.
Of course.
And since I understand simulations and video games, I map it to that. And so there could just be a fundamental flaw in my thinking, and I'm perfectly happy with that. But it does get harder and harder for me to exempt myself from the likelihood that this actually is a simulation.
So I believe it inherently, and I can't prove it. And again, even though I believe it, it doesn't change anything. I remember years ago, I was at a birthday party that Elon had. Larry Page and Sergey Brin, and Elon and I are having a conversation before the falling out, having a conversation about whether we're living in a simulation. And I think, I don't know if it was Larry or Elon said, yeah, the only way we're going to find out is if you try and tamper with it and the system resets. Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating. I wonder if this has been a subject of conversation in ancient philosophical times as well. Have you ever seen any references to that?
Plato's Cave.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very
probably.
much the same idea. Again, mapping to what he knew. He knew campfires and shadows. And
two dimensions and three. Yes.
Exactly. So that becomes the way that you think about it. But I think as people really begin to investigate the human mind, it is inevitable that you start going, hold on a second, you're seeing the world differently than me. And so then you go, wait a second, are either of us seeing the world the way that it actually is? And then once you understand that we're not, that we necessarily couldn't be, that my Umwelt is different than a bat's Umwelt, and therefore we are going to perceive everything very differently. And then you start going, wait a second, we're perceiving the world instead of just encountering it as it actually is.
So the technology that's going to come to make a dent in that is going to be BCI, brain-computer interface, right? So if I'm able to connect my mind to your mind, I think there's going to be an interesting set of correlates. So there are dozens of companies right now working on, so you got 100 billion neurons in your brain, 100 trillion synaptic connections, and the neocortex, the top layer, is your sensorium and your homunculus of action and all, your visual cortex, auditory cortex and such. And one can connect the digital signals in your brain or the electrical signals in your brain to electrodes and connect them to a computer. And those things are happening right now. Elon's got his Neuralink. There's a company actually here called Paradromics, which is doing that as well. There's a lot of amazing companies. And so we're going to start to be able to understand visually. One of my favorite recent AI blow your mind examples was a group took subjects and put them inside of a functional MRI machine, which is looking at blood flow going through different parts of the tissue in your brain. And the more the blood flow, the more the neurons are active because they're using more glucose and oxygen and so forth. And they took the output of the MRI and they fed it into Stable Diffusion. And they gave the subjects in the functional MRI machine an image to look at an image of an airplane, look at it and think about that. And then they took the signals out of the fMRI and were able to see the person was looking at an airplane.
That's crazy.
Right? And they
So
did
it could interpret the brain signals to say, this is what you're looking at.
Yes.
Yo.
Awesome.
That's mind reading.
That's mind reading. Yes, it is mind reading. And so we're heading in that direction. And so one of the things I think about is you and I both are not a single living organism. All right, you have to think about that. We're a collection of 40 trillion human cells, 30 trillion if you're smaller, 50 trillion if you're bigger. And those human cells are each individual living organisms working together
and also competing for resources.
Actually competing, but the competing yes, and supporting each other in the distribution of resources. You also have more than those 40 trillion life forms in the form of bacteria and virus and fungi as an ecosystem in your body. But you're not, we think of ourselves as Tom or Peter, but we're far more. I think we're heading towards a point where if I can connect my brain to the cloud and you can connect your brain to the cloud, and all of a sudden I've got godlike powers with a small g. I'm omniscient, omnipotent, I'm omnipresent, I can know anything, I can think and Google, I can look through your eyes, or through the eyes of someone watching a sunrise in Tokyo. We're now a meta-intelligence. We're at a new level of empathy and connection between humans. I love Star Trek, as you well know. Are you Trekkie or Star Wars?
Star Wars.
I'm so sorry for that. You're wrong. You picked the wrong part, but it's okay. The only thing that Roddenberry got wrong was the Borg. The Borg are the evil networked minds. But I think we're going to head towards a level of consciousness on the planet as we start to connect millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of individuals. I think we become conscious at yet another level. I call that a meta-intelligence. And I think that's coming as well. Enabled by AI, enabled by this brain-computer interface. You can imagine if I gave you the ability to connect your brain to the cloud and you plugged in for that moment, and all of a sudden you could understand what you want, you knew anything you wanted, you were connected to this new vault of infinite knowledge. and then I unplugged you, how would you feel? I think you'd feel so lonely and disconnected. So I think once you plug in, this is more the Matrix than not. So we can go to one of your favorite genres, but I think that's coming, enabled by AI. Let me go one other slight subject, and then you can take it back where you want. We just had Visioneering at XPRIZE. XPRIZE, we hold an annual event called Visioneering where we brainstorm ideas, and that would become great XPRIZes. And this past Visioneering, we had a couple of good AI XPRIZes. One is AI for truth. When someone makes a statement, can you have an AI algorithm that's able very rapidly to say factual truth, here's the roots of that, this is opinion, or this is disinformation? All right, I think that'd be very useful in our coming world. The other one, which was AI-mediated communication between any two species.
Whoa.
Right? Can I talk to whales or dolphins in a consistent, accurate, two-way fashion?
That'd be nuts.
That would be amazing. Yeah.
I'd love that for my dog. That would be a trip.
I know.
Be a trip.
But it would be, take me out, food, pet me.
Yeah.
But, on a consistent basis, you can imagine if you could talk to whales and dolphins, they would help you explore the oceans, or talk to birds. There's a kid that's missing in the forest here. Help me find them.
Dude, so that's very interesting. And I know the way your brain works, and you take a very beautiful, optimistic look at that. It would be utterly fascinating. So killer whales are vicious, and they will go eat a great white's liver just because they can. And they will toy with dolphins. There are dolphins that will kill other dolphins and they'll mess with them. Dolphins that try to have sex with humans. I mean, just on and on. Like, it's
I've heard
crazy.
the stories.
And I have a feeling that were we to actually be able to communicate with animals, it may be a little more distressing than we want to believe. I read a story a long time ago, and I did find this very interesting. This speaks to your interpretation of the Borg as being a misread. And it was these creatures that had these tails that had like these almost fiber optic tendrils. And when they would connect them.
Sounds like Avatar.
Yes, I would be shocked if he hadn't read this story, because it is very similar to that. But this was years ago. Yeah. I read this probably 30 years ago, 35 years ago. And they would connect their tails and they would instantly know the entire history, emotional milieu of the person they were connecting with. How amazing. And what was interesting was how once you could no longer lie or hide anything from anybody, there was a relaxed sort of acceptance
this
of
is
yourself.
Who I am, like it or not.
Yeah.
This is who I am. You got your own bullshit. I've got mine.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, and when I think about it, on a relationship side, and this is something that talk to Lisa more about, the ability to be absolutely brutally honest about your feelings, about your desires, about everything you've ever done. I mean, how many people actually have people in their lives that know everything about you, where there's zero to hide? I mean, it's like in a relationship and you look at a woman and go, wow, she's gorgeous. And you're willing to say that or something that you were ashamed of having done, but everything is fully disclosed. I think that level of intimacy would be amazing. Amazing.
It would be. You oh man, the symmetry that would have to be there though, because if there's even slight imbalance of
Sure. And therefore a lot of relationships would not work. But when they do click, and there's full disclosure and your deepest likes, deepest fears are fully known to both sides, it is a level of complete honesty. And I mean, someone who knows you as well as you know yourself. I mean, we're going in a very different conversational subject, but I think that was something I would desperately love. And I have a few friends in my life where it's like, they know almost everything possible. And it's not that I wouldn't disclose things to them. It's just we've never had those conversations. And those are the
interesting.
people closest to me, right?
For whatever dysfunction I have, only my wife knows me like that. I don't know why. I don't.
Well, just share share it with me now, right now.
Yeah, there you go, live on camera.
And then you have 1 billion people know about it.
The funny thing is that I don't actively hold things back. Like, I'm a pretty open book, but it is like there's something about sharing your life with somebody where they see all the like, what do you like when you're sick? What do you like when something goes really well, when something goes really poorly? And there's just too much intimacy for there to be any posturing whatsoever because they just see you too often.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So these are the things that AI are going to enable. Imagine with this level of BCI where you can't lie. I mean, interesting, right? Because you could probably make up simulated truths that you honestly believe, and people do that. Anyway, going back, where do you want to take this back to? Let's rewind the tape here.
Well, so the thing that I want to know, so this is all very interesting to me in terms of where this goes and how far out it gets, and it really does become quite fascinating. But right now, there are tremendous opportunities for people that really understand what's going on. Obviously, bold capital, this is a big part of where you place your bets is, do I understand a little bit more than other people where this is all going? So what is the right now today bridge? What are the opportunities that somebody listening to this should understand, whether it's AI, quantum computing, longevity, where are the big opportunities?
So I believe without question the two biggest business markets on the planet are AI and longevity, right? If you think about from a national standpoint, a national leader of a country should care about the health and the integral of intelligence over their country. If you could increase the intelligence of your nation by 20%, right, or the health of your nation by 20%, massive, right? Or in a company, increase the intelligence of your workforce or the health of your workforce. These are huge levers to move. I'm often keynoting inside of companies or YPO events or other, about those two subjects. I mean, that's my typical, that's all that matters right now, AI and longevity. And I'll ask people in a wealthy group, individuals, I mean, honestly, how much of your capital would you give up for an extra 20 healthy years? And if they're honest about it, it's well over 50% of you're going to spend it anyway at the end of your life.
Yeah.
Right. Trying to deal with.
Wouldn't you give 100%?
I think people would, but then they say, well, I'm going to leave it to my kids or I'm going to leave it to my philanthropy or whatever the case might be.
Hold on. I want to paint a scenario. You are before.
I am with you. Listen, I don't want to leave the money to my kids
on their behalf. I want to understand this mindset because this is shocking to me. You're before a credible source. Let's call this credible source God just to make it easy. And God is like, hey, bro, button on the left, you get 20 extra years, but you're going to give me every dime, all of your assets, everything.
Yeah.
Button on the right, you die tomorrow, but you get to give your family all your assets.
Yeah.
You're telling me that there are people that hit the button on the right?
100%.
Whoa.
Because people want to leave a legacy. Why the hell do you give $1 billion to Harvard? Do they really need another $1 billion? You want a legacy there. People want to know that they're going to live, their legacy is going to live after them, whether it's in the form of their kids or the form of their name. And so, there's a balancing act. Maybe it's 20% that they would hold back. But
those are not the buttons before you. There is no 20%. There's all or nothing.
Yeah.
But wow, okay. That's crazy to me. But
going back to your question, I think longevity is one of the largest business opportunities that's going to materialize over the decade ahead.
So how do you take advantage of it? What are you doing to be ahead of the curve?
Well, building companies there in that. So Fountain Life is my biggest company I'm building for a global footprint for enabling everyone to have access to the best therapeutics and the best diagnostics, right? The diagnostics are, is there anything going on inside your body right now you need to know about? If there is, you want to know because you can take action. We find 2% of the people who go through Fountain Life have a cancer they don't know about. 2.5% have an aneurysm they don't know about. 14.4% have either metabolic disease, neurodegenerative disease, cardiovascular disease, something you need to take action on right away.
And so the thesis there is your body no longer needs to be a black box.
Yes, the thesis is your body's amazingly good at hiding disease. Incredibly good.
And you're better off confronting
You're
it.
better off knowing as early as you can because you can do something about all of these things.
And why now? What is now?
Because the tech is there to image at high fidelity without the false negatives. And the tech is there to understand what the data means, right? So a friend of mine, super successful individual, who I'm doing business with in Fountain Life, and he wanted to go through the experience, goes through the experience, and we discovered 2 aneurysms in his brain.
Wow.
Serious aneurysms. He's in surgery a week later. They're clipped and blocked, and he's fine in that threat. But had he not, it was a ticking time bomb for him, right? We all know people who have, oh my God, they died in their sleep. Or they go to the hospital and the doctor says, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you got stage 3 or stage 4, whatever it is. It didn't happen that morning. It's been going on for some time. You just don't know how. So the stats are the following. 70% of people who have a heart attack had no previous symptoms, right? You don't detect cancer until it's stage 3 or 4 from a pain or something going on. It is a slow, your body's amazingly good at hiding it. You don't develop a Parkinsonian tremor until 70% of the substantia nigra neurons are gone. And so you need to look. And people say, I don't want to know. I say, bullshit, of course you want to know. As early as you can. Fully know.
Because there's now things you can do about it.
Things you can do about it, for sure. Medicine has progressed incredibly well, and it's moving. And if you're wealthy, you want to know, because I'm going to fund the research to solve that thing.
Right.
So in Fountain, the 2 questions is something going on you need to know about today? And if there isn't, fantastic. I go every year for my upload, and then I'm tested throughout the year on stuff that I'm incrementally improving. And the second thing is, what are you likely to develop? And how do we push that off? How do we solve that? How do we reduce your chance of heart, neurovascular, whatever it might be? So that's what I'm building. I built a couple of companies, one in stem cells with Bob Haruri, who's a CEO there, called Cellularity, another one called Vaccinity, that's developing vaccines. So vaccines are amazing things. Your brain is the most complicated machine in the universe that we know of. Your immune system is the next. Your immune system is protecting you against infectious disease and against cancers, right? We're all developing cancers all the time. And your immune system, your natural killer cells, find those cancer cells, right? Because cells replicate a certain number, it's called the Hayflick limit, 50, 60 replications, and then they should have the decency to die. If they don't, they can become senile cells, putting out inflammatory factors, or they can become cancer cells, immortal cells, and they grow. And your natural killer cells detect those cancer cells and zap them. But as you grow older, you have something called immunoexhaustion. Your immune system starts to slow down, and you don't detect it, and they can start to grow. And so if you can find cancers on MRI, there's things called the Grail test, which take a liquid biopsy, blood biopsy, and looking for cancer DNA in your bloodstream. And so you can do something about these now. Vaccines, that's where I was talking about vaccines. So vaccines, we know about it from mRNA vaccines for COVID and such. But we can now develop vaccines to activate your immune system to fight cancer, like go attack that.
You can vaccinate against cancer.
There are cancer vaccines now being developed. The first one that was approved by the FDA was for melanoma, which is one of the most deadliest cancers. One one of my companies, Vaccinity, has a vaccine in phase 2 for Parkinson's, going to phase 3 for Alzheimer's. We have a phase 1 asset in hypercholesteremia. So a vaccine which goes, you vaccinate yourself, it activates your immune system to go after a particular enzyme in the liver called PCSK9, which creates the bad cholesterol, LDL, low density lipoproteins. And that vaccine, which you'd vaccinate yourself twice a year for, 2 injections a year, injections might be $20, $50, basically drops your cholesterol level down. So I have hypercholesteremia in my family. My dad had very high cholesterol, whole slew of medical stuff, so I'm very sensitive to it. I don't want to do statins. I take a very small amount of statin for an anti-inflammatory effect. That's a different story. But I take something called Repatha, which is a antibody that's manufactured in a vat, and I get a few mLs of this, and I have to inject it every 2 weeks. That antibody goes to that PCSK9 enzyme in my liver and blocks it from producing LDL. Now, it costs me $10,000 a year, and I have to do it every 2 weeks. But it drops my LDL level down into a beautiful green zone. I'm using these antibodies produced in a manufacturing plant and shipped to me. What we built in Vaccinity was a vaccine that I inject, and it causes my own immune system to manufacture that same antibody for free to block that PCSK9 enzyme. That makes sense?
Yes, and you're doing that now?
Yes. I'm not, well, we're developing the vaccine right now. The first results were amazing. We're, going from phase 1 into phase 2. Long story short, the ability, there are these monoclonal antibodies, which are like the top selling drugs. And it's using these antibodies, which are proteins, to go and block a certain process. We talked about that a little bit earlier. But they're expensive. But the idea now is, instead of manufacturing these monoclonal antibodies in a vat, in a pharma manufacturing plant, can you just teach your own immune system to produce that same antibody? And that's the future of vaccines. Your vaccine, the vaccine is playing your immune system like an app.
Okay, let me see if I can boil that down to a thesis. So for somebody that is trying to figure out where the opportunities are right now, because we're living in this hyper disruptive time, I want people to be aware of the ways in which things are being disrupted so that they can go in and take advantage.
We're going back to the investment side here. So listen, we're in the middle of a biotech winter right now. Just to be clear, there was, if you look at all the biotech companies out there, they're significantly depressed. So if you're playing the public markets and you find companies that have good cash position and have strong potential drug candidates, it's a great time to buy, because the stocks are all like 10 or 100-fold depressed. So I just put that out there 1 second. I think I think the medical system, the healthcare system, is so broken, it's pathetic. I think it's gonna crumble under its own weight. And so we're gonna reinvent how we deliver healthcare. I think at home, we're all gonna be monitored. So I'm wearing a continuous glucose monitor right now. I've got my Oura Ring, I've got my Apple Watch. So there's gonna be a whole slew of wearables. All of that wearable data is gonna monitor me 24/7. So one of the things we do at Fountain as well is we bring in all your wearable data. So in between your annual uploads, which are deep dives into you, we're monitoring what's going on. So we're going to see AI.
Are you making recommendations based on what you see?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So for supporting your sleep, for supporting your diet. So my continuous glucose monitor, right? And there's companies like Levels, or there's Free Libre, there's others that measure how your body reacts to eating those peanuts or that Snickers bar, and how quickly your blood sugar elevates and how quickly it goes back down. And based upon that, going into pre-diabetic or becoming a diabetic, your glucose is a poison in the body. I don't know if people realize that. Our bodies were never designed to eat as much sugar as we do. Mm-hmm. And glucose sticks to proteins, and then your immune system sees that glycosylated protein as a foreign and attacks it and causes inflammation. So a lot of cardiovascular disease and neuroinflammatory disease is a result of people's diet. But you don't talk about that. No one talks about that.
Okay, so I was going somewhere slightly different when I said thesis. So I don't necessarily mean investing, but I mean if I can create an overarching thesis on what it is that links all this stuff together. So your interpretation of where we are in the world right now, as I understand it, is your body no longer needs to be a black box.
Yes.
We now have the imaging capacity to see what's going on. We have the ability to do something about it. There are therapeutics that are advancing now very rapidly.
Yes.
Where you can leverage the body's own systems in a intentionally triggered fashion, whether that's through vaccines, whether that's through some other mechanism. But we have a deep enough understanding of the body's mechanisms that we're able to trigger those and get them to go in and clean up, whether it's LDL or something else.
And people need to realize that your health is something you can do something about. And if I think about having a longevity mindset, and what does a longevity mindset mean? It means I believe, and I do believe this, that this next decade, we're going to see incredible progress. And 10 years from now, we're going to have the ability to live an extra 20 healthy years.
What do you think that progress is going to be in? The ability to manipulate the immune system?
So I think it's a lot of what we're doing on this XPRIZE we just announced, right? So we get $101 million from Hevolution, from Chip Wilson, who is the founder of Lululemon, who put up $26 million plus another $10 million purse for his disease called FSHD. It's a muscular dystrophy. And we're asking teams to reverse the functional loss in muscle, immune, and cognition, right? So you're moving well, you've got great immunity, and you're thinking clearly. And so over the next 7 years, we're going to have incredible progress in those areas. That's one of the I don't want to call it, it's one of the thrusts that I'm focused on moving the needle forward. And so if you believe that we're going to have this progress, your longevity mindset needs to be, I'm going to do whatever it takes to live long enough to intercept these other breakthroughs. So I arrive at this point in reasonably good health. So for me, that's the thesis, that we're going to have these breakthroughs from biotech, from cellular medicines, from gene therapies, from CRISPR technologies, from all of these things, from AI. And if I'm able to keep myself in good enough health, I'm going to intercept these, and it's going to buy me the next 20 years. And during that time, there are going to be additional breakthroughs that will buy me the next 20 years. If you want that, if you love life and you want to see what's coming in the next, century, there's good reason for you to take care of yourself.
What does that look like?
Taking care of yourself right now, there are things that people need to be doing. And I wrote a book that just came out called Longevity, Your Practical Playbook. I just wrote a book last year with Tony Robbins called Life Force. We did a conversation about that.
It's a great book.
And it's 700 pages, and it's amazing. And very few people get through a 700-page book. So I wanted to write a very practical book that looks at and says, this is what I'm doing, and this is what I think is science backs. And I put it into a few very simple chapters. Number one, what to do about diet. because they're fundamental things. We can come back to that. Sleep, exercise, like the most important thing, right?
You think exercise is more important than diet?
And I'll come back to that. So they're all important. Diet, sleep, exercise, mindset, super important. Not dying from something stupid, which I call doing your upload at Fountain, like knowing what's going on inside your body, and then meds and supplements. So the book looks at that. I actually I made a reduction. That was the word, a reduction of that into what I call my practical, Peter's longevity practices, which I have a copy over there, which is free for people. It's a 25, 30 page, like this is what I'm doing and why.
At Diamandis.com?
At Diamandis.com/longevity. And you can get my book there. You can get this PDF download, and it's very definitive. So listen, there's no one diet for everybody. I've been a vegan. I've been, a keto diet. I'm mostly Mediterranean, but the things I've discovered is, number one, sugar is a poison. Minimizing your sugar and why. Whole plants are critically important. Even the order in which you eat your food matters. Mm-hmm. Like if you're given, you go out for dinner at a restaurant, when they bring you the bread and the wine, ask them to bring it back during the dinner course. If you're going to eat the bread, at least dip it in olive oil first to blunt
glucose absorption.
We're talking about not spiking your glucose immediately, right? Which is the worst thing you can do. It really drives you to.
So why bring it back? Is it eating proteins first?
So what you want to do is on your plate, eat your vegetables first. If it's asparagus, if it's broccoli, if it's a salad, the fiber slows down your digestion. Eat your protein next, and then eat your carbs last. It slows down your sugar spike. It actually allows you to absorb the best nutrients out of your plate of food first. So even making that small, you'll lose weight, you'll get better nutrition, and you'll actually feel full having eaten the best stuff first. Right? So it's just a really small trick that I'm just like, once I learned that, I was like, okay, I need to tell everybody about that. It's just small. The order in which you eat your food matters, right? So there's a whole bunch about diet there. Exercise is probably the single most important thing. I have stepped up my exercise from like 2 or 3 days a week to 5 days a week.
Your physique has changed dramatically.
Yeah. I've added muscle. It's my goal to add muscle. Muscle is one of the most important pro-longevity parts of your life.
Are you doing TRT?
I am. I do take a certain amount of testosterone, and it's simply, I don't actually feel different. I am taking a small amount of testosterone simply to support muscle growth.
Do you base it on blood levels?
I do.
What do you steer towards?
I'm staying in like 800 range, and sometimes up to 1,000. But
does it increase your libido?
It doesn't. It doesn't impact my. It
Interesting.
doesn't touch my libido.
What?
Doesn't.
That's shocking.
My libido is fine, but I don't. If I'm off it or on it, it doesn't make a difference. And people who've got, I don't think I exhibit grouchy old man syndrome. So I'm like the most positive person I know.
No doubt.
But I'm using it specifically for supporting muscle mass. But then I'm doing 150 grams of protein a day. I'm having creatine. I'm taking amino acid supplementation. I'm focused on adding muscle mass. As you grow older, adding muscle becomes harder and harder.
Yeah.
And one of the unfortunate mechanisms that a lot of people die as they go into their 70s and 80s, I'm 62 right now, is you fall because of muscle weakness. You break a pelvis or a hip. You end up in the hospital. It's painful to breathe. You get a pneumonia, and you're down for the count, right? It's happened to my dad. Happens to a lot of people, and the survival rate post a hip or pelvis fracture, if you're over 70, is like really low. So you don't want to do that. You want to maintain muscle mass. It also maintains your stem cell population and your blood in your muscles. So there's an interesting stat. I memorized this one because it was important. If you're over 60 and you can exercise, doesn't have to be super intense, but some resistance exercises can be with or without weights, twice a week. It reduces your all-cause mortality by 50% and reduces your chance of cancer by threefold.
Whoa.
Yeah, your body, the signals you give your body from exercise and moving is that I'm still useful. I still want to be here, right? The other thing in the mental game is don't retire. You know, Google the correlation between retirement and death. It's like 5 years.
Whoa.
It's really, so, you know, when you retire and you don't feel purpose in your life, you know, I'm going to read something from, this is the Longevity Practices book, and there's a whole section on mindset here, and I just think it's really so important. So I'm going to read this to you. It says, in a study of 69,744 women and 1,429 men, this is unusual because it's more women than men, published in the prestigious journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, you know, super high-end peer-reviewed publication, it was found that optimistic people lived as much as 15% longer than pessimists.
15?
1-5.
Wow.
Pretty amazing. Your mindset matters. And, you know, making use of your body and being out there and having purpose and all of these things are subtle clues, right? We all know people that very close to their husband or wife and their spouse dies and then they die weeks later, right? Here's another story here. One of my favorite stories illustrating the power of mind over a lifespan comes from the annals of American history. As it turns out, in an extraordinary demonstration of the will to live, two of America's founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, both willed themselves to live long enough to see the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence.
Wow.
Even though in the early 1800s, the average lifespan was only 44 years old, Jefferson, who was then 83, and Adams, who was 90, made it to July 4th, 1826, both dying on that exact date, the 50th anniversary of the nation's founding.
Wow.
Amazing.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I love that story. Having purpose in life, being optimistic, making use of your body, all of these things are fundamental. And when I think about a longevity mindset, it is really, you know, I live with this every day. I care about this every day. I think this is the most exciting time ever in human history to be alive with what's going on and opening up the space frontier with
Because
AI.
of the rate of change?
Because of the rate of change, because of the rate of potential. It's like an infinite, you know, I mean, if you were born 100 years ago, and every year, right, at my Abundance 360 Summit, I look back 100 years and I look at like, what was life like 100 years ago? And what was the rate of innovation 100 years ago? And the numbers and the examples are crazily slow. And I don't remember 1923. I remember 1922. There were 7 breakthroughs in that year. I mean, not like a 7 in a week or 7 in a month. It was 7 in the entire year. And I searched everywhere, patent filings, headlines, write-ups. And so it was like the water ski was invented. A mechanical garage door opener, a retractable roof for the Ford Model T, Vegemite was on the list. I mean, I was searching for stuff. I was searching for stuff.
When
right?
one of the 7 is Vegemite, we're in trouble.
A blender for making malts, and it was like the pace of change was so slow. And we're living in a world today where there's like massive breakthroughs, you know, every hour of the day.
It's a rate of change, though, that I think now is giving people anxiety.
Absolutely.
How do you help people navigate that?
Because I think that I define entrepreneurs as people who find problems and solve problems. And I think entrepreneurs are more empowered than ever before to solve problems, and that entrepreneurs are in our world creating a better and more capable world. I mean, I think we take for granted the fact that, you know, on our phone, we've got what we would have spent tens of millions of dollars if it was even possible 20 years ago for two-way free video conferencing, right? Every game, every book, every piece of music accessible for free. And we forget with the incredible world we live in. I think people who are more in teaching meditation and spirituality are going to help people deal with the anxiety. But I want folks to realize the magical universe they're living in. I think about creating a world in which every mom knows her kids has access to the best healthcare, education, all the food, water, energy, right? This is the world of abundance. When I first wrote Abundance with Stephen Kotler 12 years ago, I talked about creating a world, not of luxury, but a world of possibility, right? And I still believe that. And there's no velocity switch. There's no on-off switch to this technology. It's happening. So what do you dream about? What do you wish you had? What do you want to do? I mean, you can put it all away and go live in the forest.
And people will.
And people will, but most choose not to.
I am very much, what do they call that? Where materialist, like it's all cause and effect. The odds that our sense of that I control my life is probably an illusion. And that just all makes sense to me. Like if you had a computer that could track every atom since the beginning of time, that you'd be able to predict where we're going to be in 10 years, and you'd be able to replay the universe all the way back to the Big Bang. That just makes sense to me. And that doesn't diminish my sense of awe in the slightest. Like I look at...
And by the way, I asked the question, if you knew with certainty that you were living in a simulation, would it change anything? And
no.
And the answer is no.
A, no. B, so you were talking about Project Kaizen before we started rolling. That's its premise, is that this is a simulation and it doesn't matter. It's still all the same.
I think it's great. So if I could finish that story with this weird coincidence, I got to a point about 5-7 years ago where I was having not this insane kind of coincidence. It used to happen about once a year in my life, started happening quarterly, and then it started happening every 2 weeks. And I can barely process one, and the next ridiculous coincidence on me. And I was freaking out because I was like really messing with things. So I have a cousin who's done 40 years of Taoist meditation in the woods, etc. So I said to her, she's my resident understanding the universe person. So I said, help me with this. She's like, well, listens to me for a bit. She goes, well, duh. You've told the universe you're ready for anything. They'll give you everything. I'm like, wait, what? She goes, you have to come to an agreement with the energies in the universe to only give it to you when you're ready for it. I'm like, where's the manual for that? So she coached me on this, and you can do this. You can do, it's, if you did it at the fully reductionist level, it's creative visualization, right? You visualize what you want and things can happen, etc. We all do that. You do that. That's what the MTP is all about, right? You program yourself and your surroundings, your subconscious for the outcomes you want. And then those things happen.
But those outcomes occur to a large degree because I'm outwardly communicating my massive transformative purpose. I'm telling the world. Those people who gravitate to it are coming to me, and they're bringing things to me that are in line with that MTP. It's not like I'm just meditating on in silence and the world is changing.
But what you're actually doing is you're programming reality.
Or I'm programming how I deal with reality.
Both.
Right? Reality is happening. And again, a mindset is how I deal with opportunity or scarcity. Someone comes to me with something that someone would be scared of, and I'm like excited about it, and I go in a different course than the other person.
So I didn't know you'd done psychedelics. What was your response? So you guys have both done it, I assume.
Yeah, I went into a, psychedelics not for joy or pleasure, but with shaman guiding, and I have done ayahuasca a number of times. I've done a combination of psilocybin and MDMA, but for me, it was my DMT journeys that were the most significant. Have you done DMT?
No, I haven't done any. I've microdosed psilocybin to virtually no effect.
So the DMT, which is also called the toad or bufo, dimethyltryptophan, I think is the
dimethyltryptamine.
Was extraordinarily compelling, and it is a dissolution of the ego, and a connection with the universe that lets you know that love is a pervasive force, and we're all connected in that regard. And that I had my most significant visualization about if you ask me the question, what do you think happens after we're alive, after we die? That was it. First of all, it got rid of the fear of death, 100%, which
Why?
is probably the most extraordinary, because it
You
gave
realize
me,
everything is connected.
everything is connected, and we're just part of the universe, and it's a transitory. So I want you to imagine, this is the visualization I had, which gives me goosebumps still to this day. I'm coming out of my journey and these DMT journeys are very short, 20 minutes thereabouts, unless you're Salim, because they last longer there. But let me finish. So I'm seeing this sea of energy, just like a frothing sea of infinite energy, a plane of energy in every direction. And I see coming out of the sea of energy 2 double helices. And they come out of the energy, and they're there, and then they go back into the energy. And that was it. And it was the realization, I can see it like it was yesterday, it's a realization of this infinity of creation and energy, and life emerges from it, consciousness emerges from it, and then re-enters it. I can, listen, this is my mind giving it meaning. We are meaning-making machines. But
So you've had that. You're just kind of rationalizing it in your previous experience. That's fine.
Okay.
That's fine. But let me tell you why I got excited by this whole world. 2012, we had a lecture at Singularity. I think it was Chris Ducharme. And what he'd been doing was doing a whole bunch of clinical trials with people taking different dosages of MDMA, psilocybin, etc., and putting them through an fMRI machine. So in the 60s, when Timothy Leary and all these guys were taking drugs, they had no idea what to do. They were just chucking it down, right? But now we know exactly that this dosage substance A will do this to neural circuit B, and know exactly the emphasis and how much of an impact it'll have, etc. And I found that fascinating because now we have a feedback loop. What got me interested in DMT...
A feedback loop to what end?
Well, because now you can see what neural circuits are being amplified or impacted, and you can now play with it.
Okay, so I have to ask then. So knowing how you're creating that state by manipulating certain neurons in your brain, how do you see an allergy or a scar?
I don't know that. I wish I did. I don't. But it's fascinating that that's there, and the numbers that it's there. If it happened 3-4 times, you go, 3-4 times. 3,500 times, I got to start looking at that. And that's just the sheer numbers compel you to look at it a little more deeply. But so for me, let's look at what DMT does. DMT, what it does is suppress the parietal lobe, which is where your sense of self sits. When you can take a dosage of it, you suppress that parietal lobe, and you are now free to explore the higher realms of your consciousness that you didn't have access to before.
So when DMT is going, is that all that's happening? Are there any areas that are more active, or is it literally just shutting off the sense of self?
Unclear, but it seems the primary function is that it reduces the activity in the parietal lobe.
I'm so fascinated by how many...
And then you start looking at other areas. And now what's really interesting to me on top of that is it turns out there's lots of old practices. Whirling dervishes, when they do their Turkish spinning, end up with a DMT release. They now know that.
Now, DMT is a natural.
DMT is naturally occurring
in
your brain. It gets released twice in your life, once at birth, once at death. So when people have a near-death experience, they see the white light, that's DMT releasing in the brain.
Interesting.
Right? So now they've found religious experiences.
I'll hook you up, buddy.
Almost all religious experiences are essentially you work the physiology of the body to a point where you have a DMT release. Tantra and Kundalini work results in that. They take ground energy, lift it through your body, and you end up with a DMT release.
I don't take the DMT journey lightly at all. It's one of the most insightful, and again, I experienced it with reverence
and awe,
and as a means to explore myself and the universe in a different way, and I'm very thankful for it.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued. I ask about this a lot, and
by the way, I got to a point after it. I said, I'm just going to share it openly. I don't plan to run for president, and I don't care what anybody thinks about it. It was critically important to me.
Yeah, it's beautiful. You met Michael Janssen a couple of days ago.
Yes.
So one of the most fascinating things about him, he's one of the most present people I've ever met. And I said, how do you maintain this? Like, you have this incredible ability to just let things go, not worry about stuff, things happen. Like, everything just passes through him, and it doesn't stick. It's amazing. He just kind of releases instantly. And he couldn't answer, and I kept wanting to pull it out. And he goes, oh, I've done a hero dose a few times. I go, hero dose? So normal dose, I guess, is 100 milligrams of psilocybin. A hero dose is when you do like 5 grams. It's like a factory reset on your nervous system. I'm like, holy crap, you've done that? He goes, I do it every year. And so all of cognitive biases that he may have built up, et cetera, are constantly getting released. And therefore he operates in this unbelievably present form. And I think that's just amazing. And I'm completely impressed by the younger generation microdosing all the time.
One of the conversations I've been having at home recently is the human species waking up, right? You've heard of these conversations, Sam Harris and all, right?
I was going to ask you guys if you've heard him describe his heroic dose.
And so when we talk about becoming conscious at a species level in the next foreseeable future, one of the questions that that Kristen asked was, are we becoming conscious before AI becomes conscious? So this is an interesting conversation.
That would be, it would be very interesting. I don't know if I can imagine an entire societal level awakening, but certainly as humans continue to progress, as we are able to share ideas so much faster in the same way that culture has stacked on the technological side, if it stacks on the insight side. And
well, imagine having a brain-computer interface connection to the cloud along with a billion other people and sharing one's thoughts. I call this the meta-intelligence, where we become conscious on a large level, right? You and I and Salim are all collections of 40 trillion human cells. You're not a single life form. You are 40 trillion human cells and then trillions of bacteria, viri, fungi, and so forth, but you operate as one, right? And so are we going to become conscious yet on another level?
To bring it back to exponential organizations, a traditional 20th century organization we would think of as unconscious. It's trundling along, trying to get profits, etc. And an EXO is a very conscious organization.
What makes it conscious?
MTP. It's
MTP is
the
an
massive
objective.
Purpose. Plus, it's constantly sensing with a feedback loop. It's constantly experimenting. It's allowing its people to operate in a decentralized, autonomous way to make decisions on their own. It's like an amoeba moving around, sensing the world and little by little evolving.
So I want to bring this back because I really want the community here to hear this, and I want to use impact theory as the example here. So there are 10 attributes that make an exponential organization. They have the acronym scale and ideas. And if we could, I just want to tick off the ones that you hit. So let's begin.
Staff on demand.
So
you hire
use
people,
use staff on demand?
contractors.
We do a bit, but I actually don't love that. It was one of the things in your book I want to talk about.
Okay.
But staff on demand.
All right.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Second, community.
Yes, very
I mean,
much.
community is massive for
Yep.
you,
Huge.
right?
Third, AI and algorithms.
Yes, aggressively.
Aggressively.
Fourth, leveraging other people's assets.
Don't know what you mean by that.
Cloud computing.
Yes.
Right. You don't have computers, servers in your closet that you're using.
We do have some of that, but not nearly as much as we leverage the cloud.
Right. Yeah. The prototype there is Airbnb. That entire business model is tapping into other people's bedrooms, making them available. etc. And the fifth one in scale is engagement. Gamification, incentive prizes,
Which is
Web3,
Yeah,
it's your
yeah,
whole
yeah.
thing, right?
Right.
You were like a master of that. So those are the 5 externalities, and EXOs use one or more of them, allows them to keep a very small resource footprint and then scale very quickly. Right? TED uses community very effectively, for example. Then there's 5 internal mechanisms that allow you to manage culture and drive the dashboard and the control framework of the organization. The first is interfaces to those externalities. So think about Uber's interface with its drivers, or Apple's interface with its App Store developers. It's an automated
APIs.
API-driven interface that allows you to programmatically manage the abundance on the outside and then add value to it. The second one is dashboards. And this is real-time business metrics to track what's happening in the
And I assume you
organization.
use dashboards left, right, and center.
Not as much as we should, but for our funnels, yes.
For your funnels, sure. And then OKRs for team performance and team management, we found as them. So those are dashboards. The E is experimentation, which is lean startup thinking, constantly testing assumptions, nonstop running of experiments, and a culture of risk-taking inside the organization, constantly testing the edges and seeing what works, what doesn't work, etc. The A is autonomy, decentralizing decision-making and allowing people to self-select what they want to work on as much as possible.
Which is one of the hardest things for a CEO or an entrepreneur to do is say, listen, here's our mission. Our mission is 10 million viewers, whatever it is, doing this and this and this. We want to give you the authority and autonomy to go and work on projects that are aligned with our MTP. Go.
Google does this a bit. The master of this, I should tell this quick story. There's a Chinese appliance manufacturer called Haier, H-A-I-E-R. They make like 55 million fridges and ovens a year.
Jesus.
Yeah, they're a huge company. 80,000 people operating in a classic pyramid form, command and control, hierarchical as heck. CEO one day decides, can't meet my corporate goals with this structure. Blows it up. Turns 80,000 people into 2,000 teams of about 40 people each. Each team has a P&L target. Each team elects their own leader. And most insane, each team decides to do whatever they want to do. Now, you go to any business school in the world and say, I want to make 55 million fridges, and they'll tell you need a ton of centralized demand forecasting, inventory managers, supply chain, da-da-da-da. Turns out you don't. These 2,000 teams work autonomously like a beehive. Every team is deciding what they want to do.
How do they decide what teams to keep?
They don't. The teams decide on their own.
You can't get fired.
If you can't, if your team doesn't meet its P&L targets, you have an issue. And the way they meet their P&L targets is they work on a product, and the revenues are pooled against that product. So when they
I
want to,
literally can't imagine this.
there's
This
a whole
seems
book.
impossible.
There's a whole book written on this. It's an amazing case study.
What's the book called?
I'll get you the title.
Please,
The case study is
because-
Haier. And when they want to vote on when decide what features should we go into the new fridge, they vote. And 2,000 teams that are constantly outwardly facing with vendors, suppliers, partners, customers, are come up with a much better decision than some product strategy team hold up with market forecasts and research groups, right? And so GE Appliances actually gave up and sold that whole division to Haier because they couldn't compete. Because you can do so much more with a decentralized organization. We're not quite ready for DAOs, but we will be over time. And you're kind of building one in its
I'm
in its own
not.
way.
I'm violently not building a DAO.
Well, think about what you're doing, right, with your metaverse environment. Anybody can come in, self-provision, and play in that environment.
They can play in that environment.
Yeah.
We're certainly trying to build things so that they can build in that environment. But that's a platform play. Like, I get platforms.
Yep.
And so our fantasy would be on a long enough timeline where, like, the YouTube of video games.
That's right.
So people can come in and build. We could go down a rabbit hole about how we're going to be different than Roblox, but we have a vision.
Right.
But leveraging some of that. But this is, like, I literally wrote before you started talking, the thing I want to talk about is how you leverage autonomy. So the way that we think about it at Impact Theory is, I want people to be able to make decisions in their area. Like, okay, your function is art, for instance. I'm not going to come in and turn you into a pair of hands. I want you to think for yourself. You understand our objectives. Go do the art thing. But we set the objectives as a company. Then the department sets their own objectives. And then the individual works with their supervisor to set it.
Yeah.
But this is not, hey, you're in a team of 40 and like, I hope you meet your P&L. Like, I can't fathom how you get to that. I have to imagine that this is never going to be the standard.
It's non-trivial to implement, but when you can implement, it's very powerful. Let me give you two examples that bridge the spectrum. One is if you're an employee and you join Google as a new hire, okay? You're not placed on a team. What they do is go, you've got 6 months, float around, meet different teams, work with them, da-da-da-da-da.
How do they decide to hire you? You have to hire for a skill
they
set.
hire, they hire basically.
That's it.
They're super
Intellect. I
smart,
just
and
know
we
you're
know we
smart.
need Python developers, so hire the Python developer. Now, do you work on Gmail? Do you work on Google Maps, etc.? What you do is you float around as that developer or front-end person or designer or whatever your skill set is, and you float around. You meet the different teams. You see where you have chemistry. You go, I really love what they're doing on Google Maps. Team seems to like me. They go, sure, come and join us. Now, if after 6 months you haven't found a team, bigger conversation, you probably don't fit there for some reason. But if you found a team after choosing over 6 months a bunch of different options, you're probably where you really, really like being, right? So now off they go. So that's one example of implementing this in the new hire model. The full extent of autonomy, I'll give you the example of Tangerine Bank in Canada, which used to be ING Direct. So they operate on this fully autonomous basis. They have no CEO, no reporting lines, no management teams, no middle management, no meetings of any kind. They literally operate on a beehive where each employee self-selects as to what they want to do. Okay. Now, you're a regulated bank. Canadian banks are very regulated, right? So what happens is when the marketing guy goes, oh, let's do an online promotion because he's self-selected, wants to focus on that, and they launch an online promotion, everybody floods to the phone banks and helps out getting phone calls. When it's regulatory reporting time, they all flood to the regulatory systems and fill out all the paperwork to fill out all the forms to show the Canadian government that they're viable. The most amazing example I've seen of this is Valve Software out of Seattle that makes the Steam platform. About 400 people, same ethos, no CEO, reporting lines. So if I spot a bug in the software, I grab 3 people, we go fix the bug, we disband. Every employee self-selects what they want to work on. And it sounds completely like a joke, but they get more revenue per employee than Microsoft. They make a fortune. So it's very doable.
Man,
but you have to start it. You have to
about this.
start it with that principle in mind.
Yeah, it's like physics. Something, a particle born above the speed of light can't go slower, and below the speed of light can't exceed the speed of light. I think you have to. This is founding starting conditions for your company.
Yeah, this is. I don't know what I find harder to believe: reincarnation or that you can do this. But look, I don't shut down emotionally. I'm very open. I just everything that I know with perhaps just my limited skill set. That is a recipe for chaos, or you have to hit a certain size. Like when I think about Google being able to do that, there's no way that you can start like that. I get how you can get so big, you have so much surplus money that you can let a person wander around for 6 months with no like real specific job, or that you can hire somebody just, oh, you know Python and you're smart, great.
You know, Valve Software is about 400 people. It's not that.
They're also the company, when you said, oh, we're doing a case study on Valve in the book, I was like, oh, you mean the company that couldn't get Half-Life 3 or 2, whichever it was, out for 15 years? I was like, yeah, I'm not surprised. But then you said that they make more per employee, so I was like, oh, fuck.
So directed execution turns out to be non-trivial in these organizations. It's like DAO governance, right? It's an oxymoron. It's very hard to
mass
get.
chaos.
Right. So, but in terms of resilience, unbelievable, because you cannot break that organization, because everybody's self-selecting. When there's a problem, they naturally find the problem, they go fix it.
I think you need to hire for that. People need to
absolutely have to hire. You can't hire. You know, Tony Hsieh tried for 3 years to implement that into Zappos, and it just failed. You can't bring it into. This is why we say when you're an existing organization and you want to turn into an EXO, don't go through the nightmare of trying to transform yourself. Create new EXOs on the edge, and let those slowly become the new gravity center.
What was the example of the company? Maybe it was the washing machine company or the fridge company, but they literally were like, oh, we're firing everybody. And then a third of them left, and they restarted with 2/3, and they did just fine.
Zappos did that, and so did Hire.
It was Hired that in the book?
In fact, Zappos, when Tony Hsieh first suggested, he voluntarily said, who wants to move to this model? And everybody was like, yeah, this is crazy. We're not doing that. So then he went, we strongly suggest that you move to this model. Then finally he said, if you don't move to that model, you're fired. And even then it failed. Very hard to implement into a legacy organization.
Did we finish the attributes?
Oh, so autonomy, and the final one is social technologies, Asana, Slack, Zoom, Chatter, Yammer, et cetera, et cetera.
That allows you to glue people together.
Peer-to-peer.
Yeah.
Right.
We have really good evidence today that peer-to-peer collaboration is much more powerful than traditional top-down command and control thinking.
So what do you guys think about what Elon is doing at Twitter? He recently was interviewed, and he said it is immoral to work from home. And I was like, wow.
Yeah, we had this conversation yesterday about, listen, I miss having an office setting. I do. And I recognize and realize that the intensity of the amount of work that gets done when a group is together is substantially higher than alone. But, the flip side of that is the geographic arbitrage, that I can get access to talent that I might not otherwise get to move to Santa Monica.
Yeah. I mean, COO lives in the Bay Area. My VP Finance is in Spain. My head of community is in Cape Town. We have a totally distributed organization. And yes, we're less efficient than if everybody was in one place, but I can operate across multiple time zones seamlessly. People are living where they want to live. They're living with their families, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm a believer in the remote work side.
Yeah, I also think we're going to see a transition as the next generation of metaverse systems come online. You know, there will be a point where we are sitting in the metaverse and I feel like I'm here with you and having this conversation. And hopefully the glassware becomes light enough and easy enough where it's very interactive.
The key heuristic, I think, when you think about Elon with Twitter, et cetera, and people, is do you trust them? Do you trust your people? Right? And most corporations operate out of mistrust. You're like checking things and you have to file travel expense reports, et cetera, et cetera. And the entire structure is set up to mistrust you. And when we move to this new model of EXOs, by default, you tend to trust the teams to do what they're trying to do the best. You're trying to trust.
Trust over control, right?
Trust beats control is one of the key implications. Jerry Mikulski, who's one of our community members, said this brilliantly. He said, scarcity equals abundance minus trust.
It's interesting. For me, it doesn't come down to trust. I don't even want to have to think about the people on my team. I want to play my position. I want them to play theirs, and I never want to have to think about it. It really comes down to results and focus, and like you need, like this is going to be interesting saying to you guys, but you need some variation of the immune system in that the immune system will detect cancer. So yes, it can say no to things that it shouldn't say no to, but it can also stop the free riders. And the just reality is that you will get people using game theory to be like, oh, you can hide in this company and everybody can just do whatever the hell they want. You will get people that then just become selfish, and then other people look at that and resentment builds. And so you get other people. How do you deal with that?
There's I'm moving all of my companies onto something called EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System.
Mm-hmm. Is this formal?
It is. It's something you can go look it up. Entrepreneurial Operating System, and what we do is we meet, and it's a process of thinking and running your organization, sort of like an operating system for a company. And we have what's called a 10X meeting every week with the entire group. We're reviewing our rocks, our action items, our dashboards, and everybody's got assigned specific actions, and it's not possible to hide in that regard. Right?
If you properly implement OKRs, you really can't hide, and yet you can give people a lot of autonomy, and they can go do their thing. But whether it's EOS or whatever the model is, it brings it together. So we have today very modern team and individual performance structures that allow us to handle that. You can hide in traditional organizations because there's 20 developers on some team and nobody knows really who the rock stars are. HR never knows. Okay?
Yeah.
One thing we've noticed, the particular indictment I would have is today's most big corporations are structured in a matrix structure. Products on the verticals, and you have legal, HR, branding, privacy, etc. And Terry Semel, when he was running Yahoo, made the mistake of putting in a matrix structure into it. And it's like that structure is great for kind of command and control, but it's terrible for risk taking and it's terrible for speed. Because every time you try and do something, you have to clear all those levels. So it was taking us close to a year to release some feature on Yahoo Personals. And MySpace was released, and Facebook was the killer here, where they came along and Zuckerberg said, if you feel your code is ready, take it live on the live site. We'll give you access to the live site. Your code better be good. Otherwise, if you take us down, you're fired. But the developers got such a sense of empowerment and autonomy from that. And wow, he trusts us to let us take our code live. They were rolling out features every week.
Do they still do that?
I'm not sure if they still do that, but that was what got them. That was what blew MySpace away, blew Yahoo away at the time.
The early days of high risk taking for any entrepreneurial company is amazing. We don't have a legal department yet. We don't have an HR department.
And
yet.
over time, power accrues to the horizontals because they have no incentive in saying yes. And so when we coach CEOs, we basically say, take all those horizontal layers and every 3-4 years, just blow them up and reinvent them.
Watch this conversation with Emad Mostak to learn exactly how AI will disrupt the entire world.
How do we make sure it doesn't kill us? Or how does it make sure it doesn't enslave us? Or how does it make sure that it doesn't give us eternal suffering? And I realized this could be the real thing that unlocks humanity. AI is not going to replace humans. Humans with